My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Leader of the Council. This meeting is live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on, and advice on how to turn these on is set out online. Can everyone ensure mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to please use their microphone? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome the members of the public to the meeting this morning, and we will invite you forward when it is time for you to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda, the first item is apologies for absence, and we have no apologies for absence, although I think Councillor Reach is slightly held up and will be slightly late. The second is membership of Cabinet committees. There is no change there. The third one is disclosures of interest. I need to declare that I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of items 9, 11, 13 and 14 on the agenda due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there is no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters. Councillor Porter, would you like to make the same declaration?
You said that in record time, Councillor Todd. I also need to declare I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of the same items due to my additional role as Hampshire County Councillor. And just as you, if there's no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters at this meeting.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's not a pecuniary or disclosable interest, but just for complete transparency, I am the Council's trustee on the Hampshire Cultural Trust, and obviously the Trust is hoping to receive an allocation of SIL in item 11, and I'm also, again for complete transparency, I'm an observer at Play to the Crowd, again, who is up for a SIL allocation.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other declarations of interest? Right. The next item is requests from councillors to speak. In terms of order of requests received, we have Councillor Williams on item 11, Councillor Lee on items 8 to 14, Councillor Bolton on 8, 9, 14 and possibly 17. Councillor Godfrey is on his way, items 10 and 13, and Councillor Horrell on items 11 and 12. I'll try to remember all of that. And I will call you forward when we get to those items. Public participation. Mr. Tate wishes to speak on a general matter that isn't specific to a particular agenda point. So would you like to come forward and make your comments?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet. On the 23rd of July 2025, I spoke at the Cabinet Committee Housing, asking about the Dyson Drive housing proposals. The Council's New Homes team had submitted a planning application for 8 new affordable homes on council-owned land in Abbots Barton, submitted on the 1st of August 22. The application was presented to the Planning Committee on the 18th of October 2023 with a recommendation to approve, but regrettably the committee decided to overturn the recommendation and refuse the proposals. Regrettably, one of the ward councillors even spoke in support of refusing the application even after all the public engagement, and unfortunately the portfolio holder at the time didn't speak at committee, although he assured me that he listened to the presentation on the YouTube live feed. I spoke at that public meeting in support of the 8 affordable housing. The planning application cost the HRA £86,638.19, and the Abbots Barton planning framework cost another £30,783.84. That comes to £117,422.03. Dyson Drive has now been completely dropped from the New Homes programme. So has the £117,000 just been written off? I even challenged the council over why they wouldn't appeal the refusal, and I was told bizarrely that they couldn't or wouldn't do so. The architect was very prepared to go to appeal, but he wasn't allowed to do that. How can it be that a scheme that took so many years to come to committee couldn't even garner the support of the local ward councillors? Councillor Becker regrettably didn't attend the planning meeting. I always spoke in support of council affordable housing schemes when I was the council housing portfolio, and so did Councillor Horrell. So I feel that £117,000 of tenants' much precious money has been wasted. Will the council revisit the Dyson Drive proposals in future, or are you content to write off this very significant amount of tenants' money? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for your comments. Councillor Reach, do you have any comments on this?
Just to say that we made a planning application as we would for any housing development. The planning application was turned down at planning committee, which the City Council, just because we are the housing developer, does not have a God-given right to give itself planning permission. So we maintain those correct walls between the housing department and planning, and on this occasion planning decided that the proposal we brought forward, very rarely I must add, did not meet the requirements of the planning policy, so it was refused. Councils do not have a right to appeal against their own planning decisions, so that's where we are. It's a rare case, but I think that's policy and process at work.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, obviously as the housing authority, we're not in a position to override the planning committee, but we remain ambitious for council housing, and we remain ambitious to keep looking for opportunities to build in a way that is appropriate and consistent with planning policy. Right. And indeed, we will be talking about how we've been delivering against that later in the meeting. Moving on to the next item, which is, where are we? Minutes of the previous meeting. Colleagues, are you happy to agree the minutes as a correct record? Thank you very much indeed. The next item is announcements. Do we have any announcements? I have two. So the next meeting of this cabinet is in 6 days' time, where we will be recommending to full council a approval of a local plan for the Winchester district. This will enable us to have planned development across our district rather than speculative development. And as we've seen recently, this enables us to fight off speculative developments such as the one we saw near Lanham Lane, and will enable us to fight off other developments that are not included in this local plan. There have been some extra time pressures put on us as a result of correspondence with the planning inspector. However, we are now in a position that we will have a full council meeting on March the 24th, and subject to the local plan being effectively scrutinised, being recommended by Cabinet and then supported by full council, we will have a up-to-date, strong local plan that protects our area while also ensuring that we get properly planned development that we need on March the 24th. So that's one announcement. On March the 25th, or possibly the 26th, so we had been told by, so on the subject of local government reorganisation, we had been told by MHCLG, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, to expect an announcement sometime between the 11th and the 17th of March. The latest information we have from one of the government's advisors to local authorities on the devolution priority programme is that it could be as late as the 26th, which is the day that Parliament rises. So that is probably now what we expect, but there is still uncertainty on the exact timing. But we will, of course, be reporting back and commenting on any decision as soon as it comes out. And whatever the decision is, our priority is to make sure that for Winchester residents, that services continue to be delivered effectively, that those in need of protection are effectively protected, and that the places that we're responsible for have strong advocates to make sure that we can deliver the best possible future for our residents, no matter in what way local government is organised now and in the future. So those are my two announcements. The next item of business is the extension of the existing waste and recycling collection contract. So we have two councillors wishing to speak on this, but before we do that, Councillor Cremoyson, could you please introduce the paper?
Yes, thank you, Leader. So I'm pleased to introduce this paper, which proposes to extend the contract for waste and recycling collections with Biffa. Since this strategic partnership was established, it has contributed to the Council's Greener Faster agenda in several ways. This includes a full rerouting to support a more balanced collection system, which has saved 13,000 truck miles per year. Secondly, it's introduced food waste recycling and collections and recycling across the district, and those are more or less rolled out and had their first collections across the whole district as of this week. Thirdly, the introduction of the charge for garden waste service, the introduction of the collection of small waste electrical equipment and batteries, and Biffa alongside our officers also deliver social value with community events as noted in the paper. We know from our community consultation work on waste and recycling that people in the Winchester City Council area have consistently expressed a desire to recycle more. If only the County Council had invested sooner in the processing facilities, Winchester would not need to be kept waiting. National legislation is on its way through, which will bring substantial changes to the ways in which the country collects and processes waste, with a goal to reduce the amount of waste and to recycle more. Known as simpler recycling, as it aims to achieve some standardisation across the whole country. This council is fully aligned, and as part of our Greener Faster agenda, we want to be at the forefront, leading the way where it is feasible to do so. Council officers and Biffa are already planning ahead to make sure the Winchester district is well prepared and ahead of other district councils. such as East Hampshire, who seem to be struggling to get food waste collections started. Local government reorganisation is also upon us, as the leader just mentioned. This will see changes coming through, which, if the government sticks to its timeline, could be at a similar time. We know there is a risk of delays on LGR, as waste and recycling services are one of the most visible services to just about everybody in the district. It is important that we take steps to ensure continuity in our services and continuity in our plans to go greener faster. Bringing this paper forward now ensures that this council is able to move forward with a proven strategic partner for its waste and recycling services, one with whom there is an effective partnership that we can be confident will manage the changes that this council wants to make. And with that, I'd ask Cabinet to support the recommendations in this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that introduction. We have two councillors wishing to speak on this paper. Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward and make your comments?
Good morning, Cabinet. Thank you, Leader. Before raising my concerns and questions, I would like to first acknowledge the excellent work done by the waste team. Missed bin rates, as is identified in the report, are low, complaints are within target levels, and the rollout of the food waste collections are really helping to improve recycling rates. I think it's very appropriate to highlight that last bit, given this is Food Waste Action Week. Green Party councillors have been pleased to support efforts encouraging residents to recycle more. This paper before Cabinet is not simply about waste collection. It's about whether the council should lock itself in to an 8-year contract extension without testing the market, at a time when both local government structures and national waste policy are about to change significantly. The real question is whether committing to 8 years, more years now, represents the best strategic decision and the best value for money for residents, given the LGR local government reorganisation, which is about to reshape how services are delivered across the new unitary authorities in the future. Granted, the decision hasn't been made, but I think we should be considering that very carefully. The report states that there's no clear evidence that returning to the market would produce savings, but that raises a very obvious question. Have we actually tested the market? What benchmarking has been carried out with comparable authorities? What independent evidence do we have that the contract remains competitive today? Absence of evidence that savings exist is not the same as evidence that savings do not exist. Without testing the market, we simply cannot know whether residents will be receiving the best possible deal. Before committing to 8 more years, the Cabinet should be confident that the value for money has been demonstrated, not assumed. As I've said, and as Leader has indicated, we're on the verge of a once-in-generation restructuring of local government. If we extend this contract today, the new authority expected in 2028 will inherit it. That raises several important questions. Does extending the contract restrict the future authority's ability to design a single waste system across the new area? Would a shorter extension, perhaps 3 to 5 years, provide greater flexibility during the transition and for the new authorities? And what break clauses exist if structural policy changes require a different approach? In other words, are we locking the future authority into today's arrangements before it has a chance to design its own system? We are entering a period of major national waste policy reform, as we've heard, and we highlighted the rollout of the food waste collection, but I think that raises several questions. Has the council completed the full rollout impact analysis? Well, it hasn't, because you've only just finished it. So does the outcome of participation rates affect vehicle numbers and contract pricing? I don't know. Would there need to be a period of stabilisation before committing to a new 8-year contract extension? We also know that the deposit return scheme expected in 2027 will remove some of the highest value materials, such as drinks containers. So the question again is, who carries the financial risk if recycling revenues fall? If those revenues change, the cost ultimately falls, I believe, on the council and residents. Grateful for clarification. So in sum, this decision to move to an extended contract for 8 years more, is it the right decision at the time of structural reform, policy uncertainty and financial pressures? I ask these key questions because I think it's important. Obviously, we get value for money for the residents. current and future, while continuing to obviously focus on the need to reduce waste by pushing recycling rates well beyond 60% across the district to ensure we avoid, and we're not avoided, we minimise environmental harm and health risks. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the waste recycling team. I'm now in full possession of my waste food recycling bins, and like many of us, when you start it, I expect we all stand over the grey bin looking at what you've just scraped in there and thinking, am I going to get that out and put it into the food bin, or am I going to leave it there? But I'm getting the hang of it slowly but surely. I find this proposal quite difficult to understand. Cabinet is being asked to approve an 8-year contract extension to 2037, and to do so 4 years before the existing contract even expires. That is an extraordinary length of time in local government terms, and it comes at precisely the moment when we know local government reorganisation is approaching. Or is it? Indeed, we will know next week or shortly thereafter, one way or the other, if it is to go ahead or not. So what's the rush? The report says that it's fine to go ahead because the contract can simply be novated to a future authority. But that really means we would be locking a future council into a contract it had no role in designing or procuring, thus denying any future authority the possible advantage of the benefits of scale. That is a very significant decision to take on behalf of an authority that does not yet exist. I'm also sceptical about the claim that this extension helps us go greener faster. Extending the status quo contract model until 2037 does not obviously drive innovation, competition, or better recycling outcomes, particularly as many green benefits are already embedded within food waste collection and the use of biodiesel vehicles. And it sits rather uneasily alongside the message we constantly hear about TC25, that the council must rethink services, challenge costs, and transform how we operate. Yet here we appear ready to lock in a major frontline service for almost another decade without market testing, without exploring alternatives, and years before we actually need to decide. Why rush into an 8-year extension now, when doing so risks tying the hands of the future authority and limiting our ability to secure better value and better environmental outcomes for residents? Because stability is important, but so are flexibility, accountability, and value for money. Thank you very much.
The notes I have here say you may want to speak on the exempt appendix. I don't know if we need to. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Cremoyson, any thoughts that you want to respond to that, or questions you wish to pass to Mr. Williams, who is responsible for the contract?
I'll have a go. Thank you. Look, thank you both Councillor Lee and Councillor Bolton for those questions. Some of those are questions that have sort of entertained my mind during this process. And I'm very glad, Councillor Lee, that you acknowledged the fantastic performance of the waste and recycling team, which of course that waste and recycling team is not just, it's our officers, but it's also the BIFA team as well. And I think that reflects the excellent working relationship that our officers have with BIFA, and it's really an extended organisation, a partnership. Those kinds of relationships are not relationships where you can pop it into, you know, one of the comparison sites and pop in a few numbers and come out with a better quote. They are very complex relationships. They develop over time, trust on both sides, and so on and so on. The paper positions this as an 8-year extension. There's another way to look at it, because the contract was actually procured for 16 years. It was set up as an 8+8 strategic partnership. And one way of looking at it is to say, okay, you have a 16-year partnership and a break point at 8 years. And at 8 years, you would, if things were not working out well, if you were not achieving your strategic objectives, if there was no flexibility in introducing new things, that might be a point at which you might want to say, let's look at the alternatives and try and find an alternative supplier. It also would be a time when, if pricing was, if there was an opportunity to save substantial money by looking at the market and seeing what the alternatives were, that might be a reason to make that break. But actually, what has been achieved has been, a substantial number of the objectives that this council wanted to achieve. We know that due to various periods of inflation, including a period in about 2022 when we had substantial inflation, we've had increases in national insurance rates and so on. There are financial pressures on any business out there. So it would be unlikely that you would find a significantly less expensive alternative, and I'm sure Campbell, Mr. Williams will also comment on that in a little while. I am aware that some benchmarking has been conducted. I think that's referred to in the paper, and these sorts of pricing type issues, they're the sort of thing that that are known within the council officer community. There is quite a bit of sharing already, so you can kind of do some reasonable testing of where you're at, and is there a significant opportunity. With all those reasons, I'm not convinced that there is a really good case to say that there are substantial savings opportunities. Campbell Williams, Mr. Williams, would you like to comment on the pricing side of things?
Thank you, Councillor Croyson. Yes, so we did do some benchmarking to look at how what we have at the moment and an extension of that compared with other authorities, and we are broadly similar. It's really difficult to make a direct judgment because Winchester is of a particular size and shape, so it's very difficult to make those judgments. But in conversations with neighbouring authorities and in independent work that was done, we are broadly similar with what other people would do. I think, having sat through the tendering process in 2019 as well, I think that was a competitive process. The contract we got at the time was the best offer we had then, and as you say, things have moved on a bit, and I think an extension of that really probably does offer the best value for money going forward.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, I think it's important to recognise that going out to retender is not a cheap and easy process to conduct. It takes a lot of officer time, and it would probably also require some external help. So these things don't come for free. I've got a feeling Mrs. Heaton would like to jump in here.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to give Cabinet some additional comfort, we did engage, as the report says, with an external independent advisor that looked at the current makeup of our contract in comparison to those up and down the country, also looking at both in and in-sourced and outsourced provision. So that piece of work took place. Just to talk to the point around why now in terms of the contract extension, you will note within the report that officers have until the 31st of July 2027 to alert BIFA to if there is a contract extension or not. So there isn't years to go. We are at that point in those discussions, but also to the wider points that were raised in terms of the changes in the waste landscape and sector. In us, I guess, extending our contract at this point, it allows us to work with our waste provider and plan how we are going to address things like carbon emission tax and so forth. If we get those things wrong, it will cost us far more, and therefore this is the most economical approach at the moment to ensure that we are well prepared for things like deposit return schemes, carbon emission tax, and us and our waste provider as a partnership are ready for when the new MRF comes on board, that we're currently told is spring summer 28 at the moment. We need to be absolutely ready to go and maximise that. So that's why this paper is being brought forward now, to allow us to continue to plan and be ready for the MRF opening and simpler recycling.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. And I suppose it's also worth pointing out from discussions about local government reorganisation is it is completely normal that contracts, you know, and services are not consolidated on day one. It is a 5+ or year process to do that consolidation. Indeed, I think, is it BCP still has 3 separate waste collections?
Absolutely, absolutely. That it's not a vesting day one. We all move forward on a one ship, and actually this allows us to ensure that the residents of Winchester receive the best possible waste service whilst local government reorganisation settles down. We've got service consistency and we'll be in a position to be able to deliver those changes in the waste reforms.
Thank you. Any questions from Cabinet colleagues on this proposal? Any comment or debate? I think Councillor Cutler, you like to keep an eye to make sure that we're being efficient and effective.
Thank you, Leader. I think the thing that emerges, and I can understand the questioning around a long contract into local government reorganisation, but as we work through the process, there is a recognition that, you know, as both Mrs. Heaton and Leader pointed out, that, you know, on day one there isn't a big bang and everything goes into the new. So I'd like to reinforce that fact that what's important for us is making sure that in the new authority, the residents that we are responsible for now in Winchester will have a good service, and that it will be already set up to move to the new MRF at around about the time of vesting of the new authority. Now, the new authority, we know that introducing new systems needs to be phased and needs to be well planned. One of the reasons that the food waste system has been so successfully rolled out is because we've planned well in advance. The move to the new MRF, say within a month of vesting of the new authority, without pre-planning, would be, I think, likely to cause absolute chaos. I mean, and so in the interests of our residents and having improved recycling over that period of time for the next 10 years or so, I think this is a wise decision to take at the moment.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. It's not just about the bins being emptied at your own home. There's a lot behind all of that. And having sat in Edinburgh and Birmingham, seeing their bins mount up on the streets, it's really dramatic how it can affect your public health issues as well. And I think that's really important. We have to think about the public health aspect of this too. So, as I said, it's not just about the bins, it's about planning for new vehicles, new collection rounds, training of people, and the concern for different household types to make sure that everybody gets the same equal quality of service. And I think that this contract has proved that it can be done really well. So if it ain't fixed, if it ain't broke, you don't need to fix it. It has the opportunity for a complete innovation within it, as far as I can see, and it gives us the opportunity as well to respond very quickly to any change in legislation. So if we moved to somebody different, we don't have that, we'd have to negotiate that right from the start. So personally, I'm very relieved that we're going to be taking this on in this way.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. As someone who's been through a number of waste tenders and re-tenders as a member of this council, I fully appreciate the complexities and the time taken to re-tender before a new contract start, which is years, not months. As other councils have found recently, even ordering vehicles adds many months to mobilising services, which has led to a number of them missing the legal deadline for food waste introduction. The councillors who spoke have pointed out that we have an excellent contractor and that extending the contract embeds many of the good practices we already have. Biffa have been excellent in dealing with change as it's happened, and we've had very few problems with, for example, the redrawing of rounds and the introduction of food waste collection. They've been happy to work with us on using low carbon fuel and the introduction of a fully electric waste vehicle, and draw experience and innovation from across the country. My view is that we are doing not only local people but the new authority a favour by moving forward now, and I'm very supportive of the proposals in this paper.
Thank you. Any further comments? No. I mean, I think Councillor Lerney makes a very important point. We should not be complacent about the state of waste collections. I remember that under a previous contractor and a previous administration, recycling declined and bins went uncollected. We should not be complacent about the improvements that we've made since taking control of the council in 2019. I think colleagues from other groups raised the right questions, and indeed, as this paper moved towards decision today, they are the same ones that we raised. Is this the right timing? Is it right to reprocure ahead of LGR? Are there savings potentially being left on the table? How do our costs compare to other places? Those are good questions, and I believe that the process we've been through and the discussion we've had has answered them to say, yes, this is still the right decision. So that's the decision in front of us today. We're being asked in the recommendations to extend the existing waste and recycling contracting with Biffa in line with the terms that are already included in the current contract. So this isn't an extension beyond the life of a contract. This is using a clause that we negotiated into it at the time that we set it. The second is to delegate authority to the strategic director in consultation with the Director of Finance and the Director of Legal to finalise that contract extension, and to make sure that we fully comply with the National Simpler Recycling Programme, and then to include, in the light of local government reorganisation, a clause in the existing contract allowing the novation of the existing contract to a new organisation, and to ensure that any contract extension allows the same. Cabinet, do you agree with those? Right, sorry, I've just been reminded there is an exempt appendix which has further commentary on that. Are there any questions or debate that you would like to make about that? I know we've all read it. I think we've probably reflected its contents in the discussion we've had without referring to the confidential information. But is there anybody that wishes to go into exempt session to discuss it? No. Okay, so we will not go into exempt session. The recommendations are, as I have outlined. Cabinet, do you agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. How are we doing on time? Fine. The next item then is approval of the tourism strategy for the Winchester district. Before we start, a personal but non-prejudicial announcement, which is I am a member on behalf of the districts of the Hampshire Prosperity Partnership Board, where we have been talking about the LVEP, the local visitor, whatever an LVEP stands for, and Hampshire's tourism strategy. But it is a personal and non-prejudicial interest, and I am there representing the City Council and other districts in those decisions. So there's no conflict of interest. Councillor Thompson, would you like to introduce the paper?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm delighted to be presenting this paper to Cabinet today. This strategy sets out a clear, practical direction for how we can grow our visitor economy in a sustainable, collaborative and ambitious way. Our visitor economy is vitally important to our district. We welcome almost 8 million visitors a year. That's a huge number. Those visitors generate an estimated £292.2 million in visitor spend, which in turn supports 5,760 jobs, which is roughly 7% of local employment. And that in turn drives an additional £78 million through the supply chain. So the visitor economy is really important. And of course, important though the finances and those figures are, it isn't just about that, because tourism brings people together, creates experiences, supports jobs and shapes the identity of places like ours. But we all know that over the past few years, the visitor economy has experienced significant change. There have been shifting travel habits and rising expectations around sustainability, as well as the growing importance of year-round experiences and a strong digital presence. And to respond to these changes, our sector has had to evolve very quickly. And I believe we already have a unique offer. We have outstanding heritage sites, market towns with their own and very different identities, and of course, our stunning countryside. And sitting at the heart of it all, where we are today, the city of Winchester, which I believe everybody in this room will arguably say that is the jewel in Hampshire's crown. But we know that there are opportunities to promote all we have to offer to a much wider audience. And so the timing is absolutely right to be endorsing this strategy, which aims to guide Winchester's district visitor economy into a new era of sustainable growth and provide a collective roadmap for the entire district, providing a clear vision and actionable plan to enhance the appeal of our district. This strategy has been some 18 months in the making and has had the direct input of industry experts through workshops and engagement, and is underpinned by a strong evidence base. It provides a robust framework that will strengthen our local visitor economy, but also positions us as a leading contributor to the delivery of tourism support across a broader geography through the Hampshire, Portsmouth, Southampton and Winchester Local Visitor Economic Partnership, which is the LVEP. This is vital as we approach local government reorganisation and will help to ensure that our district's expertise and assets are at the very heart of shaping Hampshire's visitor economy of the future. So in conclusion, I would like to thank our officers for all the work that they have put in to produce this strategy. It will help strengthen our visitor offer, support business growth, encourage sustainable practices and create a place where tourism benefits both visitors and residents alike. I commend this report to Cabinet and ask you to wholeheartedly support this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Thompson. I have two councillors wishing to speak on this item. So Councillor Lee, would you please come forward?
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to thank the officers as well for the report, and I welcome the broad ambition of the strategy, particularly the intention to align the visitor economy with the Council's goal of becoming a carbon neutral district by 2030 and the reference to regenerative tourism. The big question is, are we confident that the ambition is supported by clear evidence, funding and delivery mechanisms, the art of the possible, if you like? The report states there's been extensive engagement with the residents and businesses. But can I ask, are we happy that the distribution of responses between Winchester City urban areas and the wider districts is adequate? One district approach is very important. Were rural communities such as the Meon Valley, market towns and South Downs villages fully represented? The strategy appears to rely largely on the existing economy and tourism team budget, supplemented by partnership fees and occasional grants. What is the actual annual cost anticipated delivering the strategy? Which elements are dependent on external grant funding that is not yet secured? If these grants do not materialize, which parts of the strategy will realistically still happen? We've talked about the elephant in the room, local government reorganisation. It clearly won't go away, and we're clearly heading towards change. So if the functions such as the Visitor Information Centre or destination promotion are important, what do we think the implications and thinking is in terms of how this will work in the future? It'd be good to try and understand that now, albeit it may be somebody else's responsibility in the future. The strategy proposes exploring a sustainable destination certification approach. Can I ask which specific certification schemes are being considered? There are many. How will we ensure that it's not simply a branding exercise? It doesn't provide measurable benefits, carbon reduction, biodiversity gains, community and business benefits. And what practical support would be available for small local businesses to participate rather than creating an additional administrative burden? And then there's the issue of district tourism and rural itineraries and so on. The strategy highlights the potential for themed itineraries linking the city with the wider district. That's absolutely great. But what specific itineraries are we proposing? I certainly couldn't find some for my area, Central Meon Valley and the South Downs landscape in particular. I may have missed it, apologies. How will rural destinations be genuinely integrated rather than simply referenced as a principle? And of course, successful tourism brings economic benefits, much needed, but can also place pressures on residents' infrastructure and sensitive landscapes. Who will be monitoring these visitor pressures, the environmental impacts, and resolve the impacts on our residents when they are negative? What mechanisms exist to prevent over-concentration of visitors in the city centre and other sensitive locations? I think these are important aspects. So in sum, the strategy contains many positive intentions, and I congratulate the officers for this excellent work. However, we do need to be sure that this is not simply aspirational, but supported by clear funding, deliverability, and resilience to the governance changes that LCR, that elephant in the room, continues to pose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lee. And Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the publication of the Winchester District Tourism Strategy 26 to 31 and the recognition of the vital role tourism plays in supporting our local economy. And it looks a great piece of work. However, I do want to raise a concern about the balance of the strategy, as we did at Economy and Housing Committee. Despite its title, the document often reads as though it is primarily a strategy for Winchester itself rather than the whole district. The city is clearly an internationally recognised destination with major heritage attractions such as Winchester Cathedral, and it will always be the anchor of our visitor economy. But our district extends far beyond the city centre. We have thriving market towns such as New Alresford, unique attractions like the Watercress Line, Bishop's Waltham and its palace, and major destinations including Marwell Zoo and many vineyards. Large parts of the district also sit within the South Downs National Park, which is one of our most significant natural tourism assets. And not to mention the numerous conference centres at large hotels, Whiteley Shopping, chalk streams, Anglo-Saxon and Norman church trails, woodland campsites and military heritage outside of Winchester. Yet these places and landscapes often feel secondary in the strategy, with much of the emphasis on the city's retail, events and historic core. That matters because concentrating tourism primarily in the city risks both missing economic opportunities for our rural communities and placing unnecessary pressure on the city centre itself. Visitors today are increasingly looking for authentic experiences countryside walks, heritage railways, food producers and market towns. These are strengths of the wider district and we should be doing more to promote them. My key concern is that this is truly a district strategy. We need a clearer commitment to spreading the benefits of tourism across the whole district, not just focusing on the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Thompson, would you like to address any comments?
Yes, I can certainly address some of the comments. Councillor Lee asked about the funding that is involved, certification schemes, and also who exactly were consulted and were market towns involved in that. And I can, first of all, on that point, absolutely say, if you go to point number 6, the report actually lists a selection, actually a limited selection of the types of organisations that were actually involved in that, in those workshops and in the engagement. And certainly I attended one of the days where we had the industry in, and we had people from, not only from the city, representing city organisations and venues, but actually out in the district. Marwell, for instance. We also had people representing venues that are outside our borders, because obviously we've got local government reorganisation coming, and now we're part of this wider local visitor economic partnership. We are looking at the whole region really to promote what we have, not only within our own district but going further. The leader talked about being on the county's whatever it's called, the prosperity partnership, that's right. And certainly we are looking towards that prosperity partnership to fund some of our work towards the LEP. So that is work that is ongoing. But I wonder whether, and it is absolutely truly a district strategy, because we have consulted far and wide, and we do, if you look at the report and actually at the strategy itself, talk about what we have to offer. You mentioned the vineyards that we have. We are certainly, and you talked about having what sort of itineraries, and certainly we would love to see a sort of vineyard tour, for instance. And I know that our officers are looking at trying to put some of these things together and in place, so that on the website, when people come and say, oh, we're coming into the Winchester district, what can we do? There will be these suggestions that they can take forward. So they are all things that we are very keen to promote. I don't know whether Ms. Gander might like to say a few more words in particular about the certification schemes.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and thank you for your comments as well, Councillor Lee. Councillor Bolton, I appreciate your concerns, and what I will say with regards to the resource, the way we have done this strategy is to really, the word roadmap keeps being used, but to allow us to maintain our commitment to those key focus areas, so that our priorities are delivering on those actions, allowing the best alignment of resources. With regards to the certification programmes, again, you'll see in the action plan that we've highlighted some destination certification that we might be looking at: the Glasgow Declaration, the GDS Index, or the Green Tourism Awards as well. We will work with our partners, as we have done, and businesses across the district, to understand what they're looking for in certification, the models and the awards that work best for them as a business. We will celebrate and showcase those, but also as a destination, we will look to other destinations around the country and more internationally as well, and seeing what's worked in their destinations for sort of a little bit of a picture of how it could work in Winchester. With regards to the itineraries, again, the action plan does talk about sort of that nature concept and theming that the team is working very strongly on making sure that that is connected with the Heritage Plus themes that we talk about in the strategy as well.
Great, thank you. Cabinet, do you have any questions on this paper? Any debate? Councillor Reid.
Thank you. It's great to see, and there's a lot of work that's gone into it. And I look at the archetypes of our visitors on page 67, and I was sort of reflecting that I'm probably dressed as a country-loving traditionalist today, but I am probably a cultural foodie explorer. And I was pleased to hear the comments about wine in particular, and building on the questions from councillors at the back of the room over there. We do have vineyards stretching from Winchester right the way down to Bishopswaltham and down at the Meon Valley, so it's a ready-made itinerary, to use Councillor Lee's word. It's a bit early to talk about boozing, but wine in England is actually quite a serious industry now. We've got around 500 hectares of vineyards in the district. That makes us the 5th largest regional producer in England, but we were the 4th largest in terms of additional land under vine. So the wine economy is growing strongly here, supporting jobs and supporting inbound visitors. And the quality is going up as well. So historically around here, we would have found some fairly rustic varieties like Bacchus. These days, Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, quality grapes that you would find in the Champagne region of France. And of course, as anyone will tell you over a tedious dinner party here in Winchester, we have pretty much the same terroir as the Champagne region. Of course, we've talked about how we're going to try and tackle climate change here, but one of the few positives of climate change is that the quality of our produce, not just wine, but more generally food from across this region, is going up as the climate changes. So one place we can take advantage of it is wine. I've been banging on about it for 4 years, and I will keep doing so because I'm really passionate about the product, and I'm glad it's in our strategy.
Councillor Porter, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did actually. I follow that as well, and actually in many other countries when we go to visit, we do a food tour because it's a food tour and history tour. It's a really great way of getting to know a place, and you have a blue badge guide equivalent, and it's a really good way of dealing with it, of that learning about a new place. But I also represent in my county role Alresford, and I know the support they get from the tourist team here, the tourism team here, to promote the all the different events and opportunities in the green economy as well, and I really appreciate that. So I know that, and I know they do too. I'm just going to declare a small interest here. I'm involved with the National Garden Scheme. It's a charity. All the money is charitable, but actually we, as a family and as an arrangement, a garden scheme, it actually invites many people into the whole county for another aspect, which is garden loving, and we have some magnificent ones around the district, and all of those, including Winchester College, open for charity, and those days are very well populated, and people come from all over the country, and in fact sometimes from other countries too. So there are so many ways in which we can develop this strategy, and I think wine is one aspect, but flowers are another.
Councillor Cutler.
Just briefly, Leader, I don't quite see the characterisation from the two council speakers about this lack of rural focus on this. For me, it's one of the papers, and I've often been a critic of things being Winchester centric, but this paper is probably one of the best I've seen for looking across the whole district. And I'm pleased that it also links into the LDAP because for areas in the very south of the district, of course, Portsmouth tourism is really important, and the link is important. Indeed, my local pub, the Golden Lion, is sustained by the fact that Viking cruises come in with their battlefield tours of Americans, and every Saturday they do a lunch for them. And that is what's sustaining it. So that link with other areas is really important. I'm really pleased that's recognised within this strategy.
Councillor Lerny.
Yes, I think like Councillor Reach, I kind of fall in between the country-loving traditionalist and the cultural foodie explorer categories. I think one of the things that's important to say is that this isn't just around our local economy, important though it is, but actually having tourists in this area really improves the facilities available to local people as well. It helps maintain our high streets, both in our market towns and in Winchester. It means we have a much better range of shops and restaurants. I think most of us have been to similar sized towns to Winchester who have radically different high streets. I mean, you only need to go down to Eastleigh, for example, to see something very different to Winchester. Tomorrow I will be going out to Alresford, where I will going to see the Flying Scotsman, which is here for the week. Well, it's here for a while actually, but I would certainly encourage people to take advantage of that. We'll go for a nice meal and we'll probably go out for a nice walk if the weather's nice as well. And I think it's important to say that actually encouraging local people to take advantage of the area that we have throughout the district and indeed in neighbouring authorities is really important. I really welcome the focus on this. I think it's good for our local economy, but it's also good for local people generally.
Thank you, Councillor Annie. Since we're in the space of declaring interests that relate to gardens, I need to declare that I'm a trustee of the Friends of Denia Garnier Garden in the Cathedral, which is one of the things that plays a small role in making it a more attractive place to visit for those who like gardens managed by volunteers. But it's obviously not a prejudicial one, since, to put it mildly, I don't make any money out of it. This is a really helpful and powerful document. And I know from discussions at Hampshire it's already proving useful. One of the bits of feedback that we had on the draft destination management plan was that it needed a stronger narrative about rural areas, and I was actually able to refer to our policy and say that we are already involved, but you know, that they should listen to what we have to say about the rural economy. And indeed, I'm sure, because it is a draft document at the moment, the future version will tell a stronger story about the role of the rural areas of Hampshire within the overall Hampshire LVEP and destination management plan, and that will to a large degree come from Winchester, which has, I think, is the most developed tourism management function of any of the middle and northern authorities. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think others are in the same space as we are. So we actually provide a useful role within the overall county picture. And indeed, that ability and the work that's being done on the back of this strategy to influence the county and Portsmouth and Southampton's plans and thinking is an important outcome of this, which isn't heavily talked about, but it is definitely a factor. And certain things that, for example, need strengthening in the county's thinking, such as the point about rural connectivity and safe routes for people to be able to enjoy the countryside. You know, I look at other wine regions in the world, whether you look at Tuscany or the Champagne area, and I would like us to be Winchester to be the Reims of the Champagne world the sparkling wine, the English sparkling wine world of England. I think that's completely doable. I think it's completely doable for us to even be the wine capital of England, which is something that Vineyards of Hampshire want and which is a personal priority as well. So, but we do need to, that goes beyond just thinking about how we promote ourselves, and says that it needs to be reflected more deeply in the work of Hampshire, in this case meaning Hampshire, Portsmouth and Southampton Tourism Strategy, Destination Management Plan and LVEP, but also the thinking of the combined authority, which is also looking at tourism. So this is a document which will punch above its weight. It will ensure that actually all of us across the entire county area end up with a stronger tourism plan. And so it's one that I'm very, very happy to support and very grateful for all the work that's been done on it. So Cabinet, we have two recommendations. The first is that we're being asked to approve the Winchester District Tourism Strategy to be led and delivered by the City Council in collaboration with partners and businesses within the visitor economy. And secondly, delegate authority to the Strategic Director responsible for the economy and tourism to revise the strategy to reflect the new operating landscape as a result of LGR and the Merrill Combined County Authority. Cabinet, do you agree with those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the next strategy, the next paper, which is the Thriving and Resilient Communities Strategy. Can I thank officers very much indeed for all the work they've done on that. You've done us proud across not just in Winchester, but also across the entire county. So thank you. The Thriving and Resilient Communities Strategy. Councillor Becker, would you like to introduce the paper?
Absolutely. So you won't be surprised. I'm delighted to introduce the Winchester District Thriving and Resilient Community Strategy 2026 to 2030. The strategy marks an important step in our commitment to supporting the well-being of all who live, work and volunteer across our district. It sets out how we will work alongside communities, both large and small, urban and rural, to build places where people feel connected, confident and able to thrive. It outlines the Council's strategic approach to building strong and resilient communities, achieved through our own place shaping and capacity building activity, and through the fostering of an environment where communities can grow, evolve and solve their own challenges. In doing so, this will actively focus minds on how we can deliver the Council plan priorities of healthy communities and thriving places. Despite the challenges of COVID, ongoing cost of living pressures, which we've seen again this week, growing inequalities and the effects of a changing climate, the people of Winchester District have continually demonstrated compassion, creativity and resilience. And we saw that across the district throughout the COVID-19 crisis. And we saw communities coming together to support each other, which was in a way part of the beginning of this strategy. From neighbourhood support groups and volunteer-led services to faith organisations, charities, community centres and informal networks, our communities are rich with strength and determination, and this strategy builds on those foundations. The strategy recognises the diverse nature of the district, not just the city, as we've already heard, but also its market towns, its rural villages, new developments and the historic city. And the different pressures that each of these face, we took this paper to HEP, we heard about the different communities within the city. So it also acknowledges that communities exist within larger communities. By listening to local voices and focusing on areas where inequalities are greatest, the strategy provides a shared framework for action that responds to challenges and meets real need. To help focus efforts of both the Council and the wider Winchester District community, 5 pathways are proposed in the strategy that guide our work. These pathways reflect what residents, community organisations and partners told us throughout the very extensive engagement exercise that took place. And they tell us where the Council can play a meaningful role. Our ambition is to support communities so they feel empowered to lead local solutions, build strong networks and take advantage of opportunities as they arise. By 2030, we want to see communities that are more connected, more confident and more resilient, places where people feel a sense of belonging, where local assets flourish and where residents can live healthier, happier and more fulfilling lives.
Thank you very much indeed. I have Councillor Lee wanting to speak on this and then Councillor Godfrey, but Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to the officers for the work on this strategy. There's much to welcome in the strategy, and it rightly recognises the pressures communities have faced in recent years, as highlighted by Councillor Becker. Cost of living crisis, accelerating climate crisis, increasing demands placed on local volunteers and voluntary sector. Recent flood events in central Meon Valley, alongside the wider geopolitical instability, also remind us that community resilience is no longer an abstract concept, it is a practical necessity. The strategy correctly highlights the growing importance of parish town councils as we moved towards local government reorganisation. As higher tiers of local government become larger and more remote, parish councils will increasingly become the front line of local democracy and community capacity. However, while the principles in the document are strong, the strategy currently reads, I believe, as a statement of intent, and I think we need some more practical mechanisms, and I'll be grateful for some thoughts on that from Cabinet. Some points of clarification. The strategy states that it aims to strengthen the voice of communities and increase their influence over decisions and service design. But the question is, what new mechanisms or structures will actually enable communities to influence decisions in practice? How will we move from consultation to genuine community influence? Without clear mechanisms, the ambition risks becoming aspirational, and parish councils, I believe, risk becoming more remote and stranded. As I've said, the document rightly highlights the important role of parish councils in the future governance landscape. But how many parishes already operate with limited staffing capacity while expectations continue to grow? So I ask, can we provide any practical capacity building support for parish councils to build resilience? Could there be training, shared officer support, or resource funding to help parishes take on a stronger role? How will we, in other words, ensure resilience at parish level is realistic rather than simply assumed based on the strategy? The strategy references resilience planning with respect to the local resilience forum, which, as you know, I would welcome. It is very necessary. In practice, many emergency plans remain documents on a shelf rather than tested systems. Some parishes don't even have plans. Given recent flood locally and wider global instability, preparedness matters. So my question is, what plans does the council have to help to test resilience arrangements at community and parish level, not just at the strategic level? Will we support communities in establishing and operating local resilience hubs or community support centres during emergencies? So I would also like to ask whether the strategy could perhaps have an addendum or with a toolkit for communities setting up best practice for community hubs, emergency communications, the power and telecom outages I've already mentioned many times, local volunteer coordination highlighted and best practice from the pandemic. Telecoms and power resilience may technically sit outside the council's responsibility, but failure impacts on residents, and that means resilience. How can we help build the community's resilience in that respect? The strategy refers to improving how community funding and grants are used, which is sensible given the increasing financial pressures. But I welcome clarity on what evidence will we be using to show that funding is strengthening communities rather than simply maintaining the status quo. On the subject of vulnerable communities, the strategy highlights targeted work in areas such as Stanmore using health inequality data. That is a strong approach. But many rural communities across the city also face vulnerabilities, particularly around access to transport, probably one of the biggest, isolation, access to education skills, access to essential services. So how will the council systematically identify and help the resilience of the more remote communities? The well-documented transport gaps affecting rural residents and the disabled perhaps highlights and underscores the need and urgency. I recognise I've posed a lot of questions and made lots of comments, but I think the importance of remaining sighted on the community level need that sits below these strategic documents is very, very important. I think this makes these questions quite important, and I look forward to Cabinet's comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lee. Councillor Godfrey.
Good morning. I firmly support a clear and deliverable strategy that builds thriving and resilient communities across Winchester. Winchester is a large rural district with only one large settlement, several medium ones, and many smaller villages and tiny hamlets. While we have over 110% employment rate in Winchester, Nearly a third of our residents work for employers outside the area. So there's much upheaval among working age residents, but it's bad for the environment and bad for community cohesion. There is little spare capacity to provide support for the increasing number of older people and vulnerable residents. Isolation from services and from companionship is an increasing challenge, particularly in the rural areas, for so many of our neighbours. It would be useful if these points could be more clearly incorporated into the strategy. While I am disappointed that the administration is making no direct financial contribution to deliver this strategy, I think that there is much to be commended in it. The most important element are the structures identified that form an essential part of our community. Around this infrastructure, the strategy develops some concepts that should bear fruit, encouraging community participation, offering and accepting community help, and building social networks. While there is quite a bit of reassuring fluff in the text, and not enough of a plain talking that Councillor Lee called for, the intentions are good. Each of the council strategies should have a place in building communities, else why are we doing it? I would encourage the administration to focus more attention on encouraging communities to do more for the environment, more for their own well-being, and more for their own happiness by linking to the ideas in this strategy, which seeks to define the council's relationship with residents of Winchester. Local government, in whatever form, should be providing leadership to build and support communities that work, recognising the importance of local jobs, accessible support, and residents that feel that they belong where they live. I believe that it's important to bring together our activity with those that we seek to serve and who, hopefully, benefit from our efforts. I have been discussing these issues with the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Scott, who shares my ambitions to promote the role of the council in building stronger and more confident communities. He believes that the Mayoralty has an important practical role to play in delivering the vision set out in this strategy. With the assistance of the administration in providing a modest amount of additional support from the comms team, I am sure that the Mayoralty can highlight the leadership that the council is taking across the themes of this strategy. I would be grateful for your consideration of how you can support the Mayoralty with the task of spreading the good news. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those comments, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Becker, any reflections on what you've heard?
Choose my mic. Yes, thank you. And thank you both for your kind words about this strategy. Like Councillor Lee, I do appreciate the importance of parishes and the role that they play throughout our district. In my cabinet position, I am fortunate to sit on each of the grant panels and to hear about the amazing projects that take place across our district. And I also sit on the SIL panel and again hear about the amazing work being carried out by parishes. So absolutely do I understand what parishes offer throughout the community. And those two examples, the grants and the SIL, those are ways that we do support parishes to fulfil their ambitions for their particular local areas. In respect of emergencies, you did speak quite a lot about resilience in the context of emergencies. I think there has been a little bit of confusion about this paper. While it does touch on resilience in emergency situations, the focus isn't on resilience in that emergency context, but we do touch on it in the paper. It is an absolutely important part of being a resilient community. It's a shame that Mr. Helson's not here today to talk about the work that the council plays in emergency planning and resilience planning, because I think he would be able to provide some significant reassurance about the work that is carried out in that space. While Councillor Lee also spoke about the lack of specific activities being proposed as a result of the strategy, I would highlight this is a strategic document. This sets our high level ambitions and focuses minds on the things that we want to achieve. We are then able to prepare under that the lists of the things that we want to achieve to achieve this strategy. So I don't think this document is the place for those lists to be included, but I think if you look at page 110 of the pack, you will see under each of the 5 pathways, there are some examples there that we already do quite a lot of, but B, we will be looking to continue, hopefully, if this strategy is agreed today. In respect of inequalities, the inequalities and the areas that have been identified in this paper, that is data driven. That is driven by national data that identifies that in particular the areas of Stanmore and Winnell are the most deprived areas in our district and therefore warrant the greatest attention in minimising the inequalities. That is absolutely not to say that there aren't areas of deprivation elsewhere in the district, but those are the most deprived areas in the district and therefore do warrant particular attention. Turning to Councillor Godfrey's comment, largely very positive comments, I agree isolation is an issue in the area. I wouldn't identify it as purely a rural area. I think if you go to areas like Stanmore and Winnell, if you ever get on the number 2 bus and speak to the residents there are people who get on the bus simply to speak to another human being. So isolation is something that we try and address, and it's something that we try and address through activities like our Live Longer Better sessions, so getting older people out to exercise in our supported living communities. Councillor Godfrey also spoke about empowerment and encouraging communities to deliver ideas in the strategy. That is absolutely what the strategy is about. It's about empowering our communities to be able to deliver the services that are required in their community. We recognise as a council, we don't know what, I live in Itchenstoke. The council as a whole doesn't know what the people of Itchenstoke want. The right people to identify what the people of Itchenstoke want, the parish of Ovington and Itchenstoke. How to support the Mayoralty? I am hosting the Mayoral Awards tonight. If anyone wants to come along, one of the most lovely events of the year. So again, this strategy will set that high level ambition for this council, and then we can use it to look at what activities we support sending the mayor to, and I will continue speaking to Councillor Scott about it. We had a very quick conversation on after town forum meeting, but it wasn't, but I would like to continue that conversation with him.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments from Cabinet colleagues, or questions rather? Questions, Councillor Porter.
Thank you. And I think you've addressed it just then, but the challenge that I'm finding in talking about this to people is they don't understand the difference between an emergency plan and a resilient community. And most of the communities that are resilient aren't panicking about an emergency plan because they know who to go to, they know how to create it, and it's the ones that are a little bit more unsure. So how can we find a way of presenting them as 2 different things so that one doesn't automatically become the other?
I think it's the use of this word resilience. I think resilience to councils has a very specific meaning. I don't know that that meaning is shared by people outside the kind of council and the council law mindset. I think to the layperson, a resilient community, they don't automatically go to the emergency resilience space. Sorry, I forgot the question.
Well, I think actually I was going to illustrate it. Actually, one community said, "Well, actually, we've got the such and such club. They connect one that connects lots of older people together. We don't need to think about resilience because we do that automatically. But then they do need an emergency plan. So it's that conversation of perhaps the word resilience is a word we've got to change. So perhaps it's connectedness rather than resilience, although that doesn't really describe it. And we need a way of being able to talk to our parishes as well as the parish councils themselves to understand the difference, because it really is, it's very good if you read the whole paper, you understand it, but it's getting them to read the whole paper.
So and that is partly why we have created the condensed version of the strategy, because we recognise that the whole strategy is quite dense to expect people to read. So there is the easier read version. Ms. Robbins, I don't know if you want to come in here. I think resilience, I think, is the right word, though. We are talking about making communities that are strong, that don't rely on one or two individuals to get things going, that they are a cohesive unit where activity continues. So I think resilience is the right word. I'll bring in Sue here.
Thank you, councillors. I agree. I do believe it's the right word, because I think this is also about the resilience to shocks and challenges and changes that go on at smaller scales. It's not always that large scale emergency response. It's about how resilient people and communities are to some of the more everyday or more common types of shocks and changes within, the wider environments and society that they need to be able to withstand and also then be able to respond to and move on from. So I think we think of emergency planning as quite large scale, but this is about resilience at a smaller scale as well, and an individual scale as well.
Go back to the point, it is hard for people to understand the difference when they're talking about it. So we've got to find a way of communicating that, and perhaps promoting the easy read version is the answer.
Any other questions? The Chief Executive, one of the questions that was talked about was the level of funding and resource that goes into supporting parishes, and I wonder if you could provide a bit more perspective on that.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Members, it's a really interesting debate, and the common phrase used is community resilience, and then it splits into the two parts, which is emergency response and being an effective, thriving community. And we have to remember that all of our communities, whether they're rural or urban, we want them to be effective and thriving, and this is what this policy is doing. And I would just reflect that we've seen the strength of our communities during the pandemic. At that point, they were working in an emergency. We were all working in an emergency planning construct, but we absolutely saw people create community resilience. So we know that those skills are there, and we know that those communities will come together to support people. And it's something about just codifying that. But we also, need to remember that our parish councils are sovereign bodies, and it is their choice as to the level of detail they wish to specify and how much they rely on informal communications. But Councillor Lee has asked this question before, and in fact provided a really helpful list of funding available for parish councils, for instance, from the government, around £10,000 per project to build community hubs, emergency meeting spaces and resilience facilities. And he provided that to all members back in January when he raised that. There's £25,000 supporting rural communities, which is around, again, resilience and sustainability. So those two elements linked together. So what we'll do, we shared that with parishes earlier, but we'll just check whether those funding streams are open. And as you know, members, we have a regular and effective and routine and I think well received method of comms with our parishes through you as ward members. You're there all the time. I know you are. And that is great. And also we have a parish connect. So we'll check these funding streams and pop out that information for any parishes that wish to take advantage of that. And Members, you're also right. Local government reorganisation provides an opportunity for local councils of whatever size and shape to really participate in place-based delivery. And we already do that as a district council. We are completely in touch with our local communities through all the voluntary organisations and parishes that exist. And we will take that commitment into the unitary authority. We're not there with how it's going to be shaped and what the committee is and what the liaison is. What's important is, as you've said, Councillor Porter, the commitment to do it, which is what you've said, Councillor Becker. This is about building capacity and supporting our local communities do more that they want to do for their communities because they know best. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any debate on this paper? Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on what the Chief Executive said, because I think one of the key roles during local government reorganisation is going to be about how, in a larger authority, the connections are made to local areas. And by having this strategy, I think we've got something to take to the table in those discussions in joint committees as to how we may be able to approach it. So I think it's really useful in that context, as well as the context of how we go forward in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. Councillor Porter.
I think as well, it's really useful, even reading through, that we recognise those groups that are on areas that don't necessarily have that capability themselves. And you've mentioned two already, Stamford and Winnell. And if you look at the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, it's very clear where our needs are. The dark blue is there for all to see right across that map. And those two stand out. And there are other areas in Winchester District, but not as great as those. And so I think actually the formation of a Winchester Parish may well help that opportunity, may well provide that opportunity to do something about that and think about it in a different way. But for me, that is the real strength of this paper, that it will actually allow us to make real efforts to for those communities who don't feel they can help themselves, but to support those that can. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any last thoughts, Councillor Becker?
No, just to say thank you for the kind words about it, and to thank the officers for all the work that has gone into this. I know this paper is a little bit had taken a little bit longer than we had hoped, but I think we have what we have is a very, very strong, very deliverable strategy. So thank you for continuing and persevering with it.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, and thank you to councillor colleagues for their comments and thoughts on this as well. I think the point of the role of parishes and the work that is already going on and the funding that's already going on to support parishes and their resilience is critical, although it's also important to remember they are not the only local institutions and the only local representatives. Councillors play a vital role, district councillors and county councillors play a vital role and have a direct electoral mandate, which often isn't the case for a parish. And there are also many other bodies that play a vital role in any community. And they are, of course, sovereign autonomous bodies. We're not in a position to tell them what to do, nor should we be. It is one of the things that I think will protect us at the time of local government reorganisation, is that there is one part of the system that isn't being reorganised. I thought the points that Councillor Godfrey made about the importance of every council strategy having a lens on the question of supporting and building community resilience is an important one. It does need to be something we think about in everything we do, and we've tried to reflect it in the council plan overall. And I thought his point about seeing the mayoralty as an asset to help with this rather than a thing we do because we've always had one, it is helpful and is a thoughtful intervention that we need to find out how we can properly support. One of the challenges we face as we go forward is whichever option gets chosen, or even if the government comes up with their own option for local government reorganisation, the resulting councils are going to be much, much bigger than what people are used to with current districts. And the risk is that due to the financial pressures they face, the scale of operation they have, the degree of reorganisation they're going through, it becomes harder to provide that kind of local resilience and support. during the transition period. And so actually work we can do ahead of LGR to build strong, resilient communities is incredibly important. And so this strategy is very timely and valuable, and reflects, you know, the fact that we have it in front of us today reflects the importance that this administration puts on helping all our places everywhere in the district, no matter what their circumstances, to, as it says, thrive and be resilient. So we have a very simple recommendation in front of us that needs agreement today, which is to adopt the Winchester District Thriving and Resilient Communities Strategy for 2026 to 2030, as shown in Appendix 1. Cabinet, are you agreed?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Keep going. Good. So moving on to, and a huge thank you to the officers that worked on it. And if you could pass that on, Mrs. Robbins, that'd be much appreciated. So the next item is the Community Infrastructure Levy funding paper. And Councillor Porter, would you like to say a few words about it?
This is a good example of that adding resilience to local communities, I think, and value. So when new homes are built, many of them attract Community Infrastructure Levy or S106 funds. And this paper describes how the money received as Community Infrastructure Levy, which I shortened to SIL, is redistributed to support real projects of significant value to improve the lives of residents in Winchester and across the district. SIL is a powerful way to reinvest in the places we work, live and enjoy. It allows us to deliver projects that enhance the quality of life and celebrate the local identity of our communities, both larger and smaller. By using SIL in this way, we can help to deliver and lead on projects that meet today's need and build stronger, more resilient communities for the future. Since the scheme started in 2014, the SIL received in Winchester City Council is just under 26 million. The detail of that account is shown on page 173. SIL funds are granted but not paid out until proof of expenditure is provided, so it's good value. Money not spent after a period of time is released back into the fund, and there's a small amount being put back into the fund today in this paper. The scheme of payment has developed over time and now includes detail of the SIL received in total for that parish, or in Winchester's case, the money identified for the City Wards area. And this is detailed in the paper too. Over the years, significant sums have been generated by our city developments in our market towns and in our larger villages. We aim to ensure that the money generated is used as locally as possible to improve the local infrastructure and benefit residents near to where the SIL is received. Underpinning the assessment of all projects is the link to recent development. I'd like to thank communities, officers and councillors who've worked so hard to deliver projects for this and previous rounds of SIL allocation, not forgetting the officers who also collect the SIL too. We as the Lib Dem administration are committed to supporting active travel projects around the district, which up to now have been developed by Hampshire County Council. To date, there are a number of these projects stalled and thus grants as yet unspent. So therefore, we've reviewed and realigned the ring-fence funds to be more flexible in future as we move towards LGR. So there are 16 SIL allocations recommended from the community funds, total value 1.088638 million. These are listed, but I won't make any apologies for listing them here too. A new pavilion at Wickham. Extension of, and these are contributions towards them in some cases and paying for the whole thing in others. A new pavilion at Wickham, extension of the Chesnell Theatre, a renewal of Colden Common Skate Park to accommodate younger children too. Energy efficiency measures at the Theatre Royal to improve efficiency, cut carbon and increase sustainability of the building. Additional allotments at Kingsworthy, remodelling and refurbishment of the Grade 2 listed Gurkha Museum for better public access. Improved kitchen facilities at Durley Village Hall, upgrading toilets and kitchen at the Carroll Centre, landscaping at Colden Common Bowls Club to improve accessibility, a new lift to upper floors and toilets to increase accessibility at Christchurch, Winchester, Improved surfacing and lining of the Mugger in Knoll Village, including Making Space for Girls project. A new heating system for Trinity Winchester to include improved sustainability and cut carbon emissions. Renovate and update the Port Borant Pavilion to create a community hub. And then contribution towards the remodelling of Winchester City Museum to include the 878 exhibition to incorporate this period of history into the resident and visitor offer there. As you can see, it's a really wide range of opportunities and included so many cases about accessibility too, which is good. But the two specific active travel schemes being put forward for approval here are the first, the upgrade of a section of footpath to improve use for cyclists and walkers, providing a really useful route to Swanmore Technology College from Bishop's Waltham. This is part of a bigger project and I'm hoping that we'll be doing more in the future. And then the upgrade of two riverside footpaths to link the Worthies and Winchester to routes into the South Downs National Park. This project upgrades the network of paths along the Itchen and meets the new paths are being upgraded by the National Highways Active Travel Works as they do M3 Junction 9. Winchester City Council is also committed to cutting carbon, not just for the council, but for others in the district too. Funding for these projects do exactly this, and it comes to a total of £331,000. 132 solar PV panels on 4 publicly accessible buildings on the Cathedral Estate, avoiding 9.6 tonnes of CO2. 332 solar panels on Winchester Science Centre, it's a big building, to avoid 9.7 tonnes of CO2. And 62 solar panels on the Meadowside Leisure Centre in Whiteley, saving 4.6 tonnes of CO2 and estimating reducing running costs there by an example of over £5,000. Neighbourhood Sill in Winchester is allocating £110,000 for the Mugger at St Matthew's Field and £6,000 for revenue for a project with youth options, Making Space for Girls. This is a really popular fund and importantly, there's going to be an opportunity for another round of SIL applications in 2026 with improved flexibility whilst retaining councillor oversight. A timetable of our more ambitious scheme is shown on page 188 and the next window for bidding will be in June with decisions by September 2026. So broadly, I'm asking members to support the allocation of funds, to support the revised programme for bidding and the changes in delegation as outlined on page 189 for the next round. Thank you. Do you want me to go through the full list of recommendations?
No, I'll do that. Don't worry. Something for us all to look forward to.
Yes.
We have 3 councillors who wish to speak on this. Councillor Williams, would you like to come forward?
Good morning. I will keep my remarks short. As I always pop my head up when there's a SIL allocation in Bishop's Waltham or Durley as well in this case. I just wanted to obviously thank first of all the Bishop's Waltham to Swanmore Cycle Routes project that's been allocated 300,000. This is a project that sort of emanated from parish councils at Bishop's Waltham and Swanmore originally back about 4 or 5 years ago, back before Councillor Latham was actually elected to Winchester in his parish council role, but he's been working incredibly closely with Councillor Wallace as well, and both Swanmore and Bishop's Waltham parish councils as well as landowners across the route in getting agreement for this scheme to go ahead. So big thanks to them. Councillor Latham was due to come to speak today, but unfortunately he couldn't make it at the last minute, so I'm unfortunately here instead. The route itself, so Swanmore Secondary School is the main secondary school for Bishop's Waltham, and currently there is not an off-road cycle route. So this really will make a huge difference to pupils that attend Swanmore, especially as many Bishop's Waltham students are just within that 3-mile catchment range, therefore can't get the bus, unfortunately. And then in regards to the 23,000 allocation towards Durley Parish Hall's kitchen refurbishments, I'm incredibly welcoming on this. So Durley Parish Council and their hall offer a huge number of events through hire of their parish hall. There are particular notable events in regards to holding many wakes from the West End crematorium, and obviously with this investment, you're not just sort of helping out and offering Durley residents an increase to their facility, but many residents from the Eastleigh district who use their facilities as well. So I just wanted to sort of say this is perfect timing as well, especially as Durley need to let the contractor know tomorrow whether the allocation has been made and they can go ahead with the refurbishment of their kitchen. So thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lee, would you like to make some comments?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to the officers for the report. I support the principles behind the community infrastructure levy. So important that development should contribute to the infrastructure and community assets that make places livable, sustainable and resilient. And I hope any planning reforms that might be in the offing do not degrade the scheme. The SIL programme, as highlighted by Councillor Porter, it has highlighted a number of worthwhile investments across the district, which are very welcomed and clearly benefit the residents and strengthen community life and the environment. However, the report, I believe, raises some important questions about fairness, geographic balance and governance. And I guess it depends what sort of lens you're using to look at the programme. So from my perspective and my number crunching, I see a programme that proposes 6.5 million of SIL investment. Of this, roughly 5.8 million is allocated to Winchester City or urban areas, whilst about £700,000 supports rural communities and villages, meaning close to 90% of the funding benefits the urban area. And I recognise that 4.5 million allocation to central Winchester regeneration drives much of that difference. But even excluding that project, urban Winchester still receives the lion's share. For a district where many residents live in rural parishes, this raises some legitimate questions about fairness, I believe. Rural areas also experience the impacts of development, traffic, service pressures, and the need for improved connectivity, yet funding appears sometimes too small and perhaps fragmented. So in terms of equitable resilience, I suggest there may be an issue there. So can I ask the question, can the council ensure that SIL investments going forward in the next 2 years will perhaps look at a fairer approach for SIL outside the city? The report also proposes revising the SIL framework so that 40% of SIL supports community and local infrastructure, while 60% supports strategic district infrastructure. That structure, I think, makes sense, but it's important that strategic does not simply mean projects located in the city or the urban areas. Strategic infrastructure should benefit the whole district. And as really highlighted by Councillor William, and very welcome, and working with Councillor Wallace, the Swanmore Bishop's Waltham Cycle and Footpath Scheme is a welcome example of investment supporting rural connectivity, and if much more is needed. So can I ask, as the council moves to the proposed 40-60 split, how will it ensure that strategic infrastructure funding benefits the whole district? With local government reorganisation approaching, this may also be the right time to strengthen the support for rural parish councils, creating greater guidance and engagement around SIL opportunities. Underpowered parishes, I think, often struggle. So turning to Appendix 1, the allocation framework, while the framework works in principle, I think the diagram is difficult to interpret, and the category Winchester City Council infrastructure receives 60% of the funds is extremely broad, potentially covering regeneration, transport, leisure or economic development. But because of that breadth, large urban projects, I fear, will dominate allocations, as the framework appears to include no explicit geographic balancing mechanism. So the extent question is, how does the council, going forward, how can it ensure SIL investment is distributed more equitably across the district and aligned with infrastructure priorities? The report proposes delegating authority to officers to improve SIL allocations up to £500,000. While delegation can improve efficiency, SIL often viewed by communities as the infrastructure dividend from development. So transparency, I think, is going to be important. So how can we do that if that delegation works that way? And can I also ask, the report also refers to the informal panel, but the appendix does not clearly explain its composition, scoring criteria, or decision-making process. So can I ask, what safeguards will accompany the proposed delegated powers to ensure transparency, accountability, and geographic fairness in future SIL allocations? I think it is very important that we retain public confidence in this process and we operate fairly across the whole district. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Horrell.
Chair, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet. As we know, SIL is an important facilitator, enabling significant projects to come to fruition, which ordinarily would not go ahead without the SIL injection of cash, and obviously will help deliver more resilient communities. I do support a more agile approach to applications for the Community Fund and the shortening of the timeframe suggested. But are we sure £500,000 is the correct level to delegate authority and to ensure transparency? As already said this morning, the breadth of community projects in the district is admirable and should be encouraged as we move forward. It will be therefore important that all bodies understand the new approach that we are recommending and the 2 windows of opportunity to apply, and to ensure all those groups have best access to the information so that they can make their applications. Chair, please can you explain to residents why £4.5 million needs to be allocated to the Central Winchester Regeneration Scheme from SIL? Why does the scheme require this significant level of underwriting from the City Council over and above the many millions already committed by us for land purchase and consultants? For example, why are we not recommending monies to be allocated to the Northern Park and Ride, which is one of the most important projects in the movement strategy that was agreed many years ago? And given the DIO have confirmed the land is available to build a park and ride, SIL seems an obvious source of funds for such a key project and to help with the movement around the city, which, as we all know, over recent weeks has been pretty difficult. Also, Chair, I think it's important that we help people to understand why we're underwriting solar panels for the cathedral for over £100,000. Not to say that solar panels as a project are not commendable. In fact, the 3 identified are very positive. But it seems odd when the cathedral has £4.5 million as of the end of last year in unrestricted funds. One would have thought that they would have actually moved forward on such an important project themselves. So understanding why we're stepping in on some of these things would be helpful. Clearly, on the community projects, we're helping organisations who don't have the depth of resources. So this is when SIL really comes into its own. But there does seem some disparity in the allocations recommended and where our priorities actually sit. I hope these questions are helpful to bring clarity to those who are reading the paper and those who might want to apply in the future. Thank you.
Sorry, just before you jump in there, Councillor Todd, just to give my apologies, I have an important meeting I need to attend now, so I will be leaving the meeting for half an hour and returning at 12.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for letting me know. Councillor Porter, would you like to respond to those
Yeah,
points?
thank you. Councillor Lee, you mentioned that we want to be able to support smaller communities. At the moment, the policy is about making sure that the SIL is spent where the money is generated. Some districts actually decide to spend it all on one thing. So Fareham decided to spend it all on the theatre. So every single penny went to the theatre. And so nothing went to the community that had actually had that issue and that development. And so often, and you will hear it in your own villages and your own communities, people say, oh, we can't have those developments because we don't have the infrastructure. Well, this is an attempt to put that infrastructure back into those developments and those areas where they have developments. You asked about the potential for smaller communities, and I agree, there is something that we need to do there. And this is the first time this time we've actually given money to a smaller community who doesn't have SIL itself, because it had development that came out of permitted development, but actually also is very impacted, and I think Councillor Williams described that absolutely, and has the potential to make it more resilient by using other money as well. The informal panel, and you asked about the scoring criteria. So the informal panel consists of Councillor Becker from Communities, Councillor Nerney and myself. And between the three of us, we believe on Cabinet, we have the necessary knowledge about those communities to be able to make decisions. But we're also supported by our 151 officer and our SIL team, who investigate every single application before it comes to the panel. The actual scoring criteria are actually on pages 203 onwards, and that is sent out, and that scoring criteria is very open and transparent. It was worked through with a group of councillors a couple of years ago, and it's been updated and improved a little bit with experience, and that shows very clearly what you're being assessed against and the points you'll get for those criteria. And we very much use the numerical outcome of that as part of our assessment for the criteria for the decisions we're making. You ask about capital projects. I think in fact this came up from both councillors. You asked about the approval of capital projects up to 500,000. Well, actually more than 100,000 but less than 500,000 Cabinet will have to approve, and then only more than 500 full council will approve. But it puts in a potential for a quicker response if we want one, but we're aiming to hold those panels nevertheless. But as we all know, that there are some limits on the financial decisions we can be making and publishing before September, and so this is an effort to make sure that we don't miss out on giving grants out whenever we can. I think that's pretty much the areas we've covered. I think public confidence in the process. We put this process out to parishes, and we put it out to on our other public information systems, and actually to see this time the range of people that have actually come forward and groups that have come forward that are seeking SIL shows that it's getting out not just to parish councils, not just to the city council, but to other places as well. You mentioned those three areas for solar panels. We have agreed that they can be taken out of this fund because they are it's some prudential borrowing on this area, but actually will also bring huge benefits, and Councillor Nerney might like to talk about that in a moment. I think that's probably covered all the points you made. Thank you.
Councillor Nerney.
Thank you. I think it's important to say that while this is a project which is taking place on the cathedral and indeed on the Science Centre, this is actually a Winchester City Council project. It is subject to a business case showing that it will pay back over time. And I think it's an excellent way of us helping some of our local tourist and heritage assets to decarbonise and also to make them financially more viable. It is true that the cathedral has considerable resources. However, if you look at the context of the annual maintenance bill for the cathedral, it's not actually very much at all. So I think it's important that we're able to help out for a project which absolutely fits in with our city goals. I would also like to take the opportunity to point out that projects in Winchester often benefit a much wider area. The idea that because we're spending money on things like the Gurkha Museum, that's detracting from surrounding villages and the market towns is, I think, untrue. It's a that is, for example, a very important asset to the community. My own ward has raised nearly £3 million of SIL. We've received less than 10% of that back, even including the additional allocation that's made in this paper for the mugger. I don't mind that because I know that my community benefit from, for example, the money spent on the leisure centre, KGV, all of the other parks around the area, and also from money that's spent in the villages, for example, in Littleton, where we funded the park hall facility there. So the benefits of these all spread out widely. It will not just be residents of Durley that are using the Durley Parish Hall. So let's not get too parochial and try and grab all the money for ourselves. If you want to give me the rest of the £3 million for St Barnabas, I'll be very happy, although I would be struggling to find somewhere to spend it.
Only after the remainder of the £6 million in St Paul Ward has been paid over, I think. Mrs. Heaton, do you want to
Just to point out and remind members that SIL collected it within the park is collected by the park and allocated by the park, not Winchester City Council. So that may talk to the point around the allocation looking rather city heavy.
That's a very helpful perspective. It is 40% of our district, although probably 0.1% of the development in it. Thank you very much indeed.
I didn't address the point about CWR that Councillor Horrell raised. Can I just pass this out, Councillor? So Simon Hendy for this answer, please.
Yes, yes, thank you, Leader. You'll be aware from the recent successful engagement with the community around the ongoing design for CWR that clearly there is work that's being designed at the moment which will generate expenditure on what will be still eligible work. And therefore our partner Igloo needs to know that that funding is available when they bring forward the business case for that scheme later on in the year. The other point to be made, of course, is that this is not a zero-sum game. When the CWR scheme comes forward, there will be significant SIL generated by that scheme to be invested back in the community afterwards.
Thank you. That's a very important point. I think there's also the point of the, shall we say, the gap between the infrastructure necessary to deliver the project and our aspirations for the infrastructure that we have for the centre of the city to reflect its vital role as a centre for not just this district, but actually much wider, as we talked about earlier in the tourism strategy. Any other questions that people want to raise? Any debate? Lucille. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Leader. I'm really pleased to see this paper, and it's really fantastic to see the list of projects and the amount of money that we are going to be putting out to the community. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And of course, we're right to do that right now because we're facing the structural change order down the line, and we want to make sure that we are able to fund all these fantastic projects. I just wanted to touch on a few because, of course, earlier in the agenda, we talked about our tourism strategy and the assets that we have, and a number of the allocations that we are proposing today go towards helping those assets really become a stronger asset within the local government reorganisation eye. For a start, I'd like to mention the Gurkha Museum. Really pleased that we've been able to agree their SIL allocation. I think this is a fantastic opportunity to really help the museum with they're already under a really major refurbishment project funded by the lottery, and to be able to contribute to that I think is fantastic, making it more accessible, and it will become a real asset for members of the Gurkha community that we have here, but also around the region to come to and enjoy. Also wanted to mention the City Museum. I think for a long while now, we have thought that perhaps City Museum needs a bit more investment than it's got. It's looking a little bit tired. So really pleased to see that allocation too. And also play to the crowd, upgrading our theatre. It's a very aged building and there are all sorts of issues with it, and there are always plans to make that venue more resilient, and this can only benefit that facility. And finally, just to say, I'm absolutely delighted that there's going to be another round, because that's really good for all our organisations and communities around, and I hope we will be letting everybody know that there is another allocation coming, so do work up their bids right now. So thank you very much, and I will be supporting this paper. Thank you.
Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'd just like to welcome particularly the allocation to North Borehunt. We were talking about community resilience in the previous paper, and here is an example of a parish council that for a long time, I wouldn't say, well, more recently has become far more proactive and developed quite a substantial community level of community engagement. But the lack of facilities in a place that has grown by more than 200 people due to lawful development consent on a static caravan park, and has no facilities, no transport, nothing, whereas the parish council is working really hard to develop that resilience and community spirit. The need for that refurbishment to create a human community hub is hugely important, and I think it's I really welcome the fact that we can support that.
Any further comments? Well, what can I say? First of all, a huge thank you to all the work that's done to assess the bids that have come in, and to look at choose the ones that offer most value and help address the pressures of development right across the district. It's great to see that the pressures of development are being reflected in investments in community facilities, leisure, culture, heritage, active travel. I know that the plan for the Swanmore to Bishop's Waltham footway and cycleway has been knocking around for a while, and it's one of those ones where you go, if we have any kind of seriousness about active travel, it needs to be funded. And indeed, that I'm pleased that the second recommendation calls out our desire to keep pushing ahead, not just the movement strategy in Winchester, but we need to be thinking about all active travel right across the entire area, including the new combined LC WIP, which I think we touch on later in the meeting. This can be challenging. Hampshire County Council, according to the 2026 Home Builders Federation report on the usage of SIL and Section 106, Hampshire County Council is the worst in the country for unspent highways and roads contributions. So the fact that we've managed to get something away with them is good. and it remains a priority. We had a recent meeting with the county to talk about how we can unblock this process within the Winchester district, and get more money spent to make the cycling and walking improvements in particular that are so desperately needed. And it's important to note also that not all districts are managing to get their money away. The worst district council in the country is Mid Suffolk. £47 million of SIL and Section 106 it's sitting on at the moment. It is, of course, the only Green majority controlled council in the country, failing to invest in infrastructure in the only area where they have absolute control of the council. But we are moving ahead with our investments. We have a good plan here that works right across the entire district. It supports our regeneration ambitions as well, our ambitions for how the centre of Winchester can be, how we can deliver on our aspirations for central Winchester regeneration above and beyond, particularly in terms of the infrastructure and the public realm that we're looking at. We have a long list of recommendations to agree. The first is the change to the strategic procedure for SIL allocation and spending. The second is the commitment to the joint movement strategy with Hampshire County Council, and actually a wider commitment right across the district in terms of transport and active travel. The third is using the 1.1 million from SIL receipts, using the SIL funded community grants budget for the 14 projects listed, noting that 4 applications were refused, noting the application by the Town Forum for Winchester SIL, which we are allowing a budget for in terms of to deliver the mugger in St Matthew's Field. Note that 110,000 allocated to 3 community schemes that are no longer going ahead is being released back. Noticing our 360,000 funding for projects joint with Hampshire, noting 331 for the council-led projects, where I think we actually end up owning the solar panels, as has happened, for example, at Marwell, which would be placed on the Cathedral and the Science Centre, subject to a business case, approving the capital expenditure for solar PV at Meadowside, as referenced, the mugger at St Matthew's Field, continuing the allocation and approving the allocation of 4.5 million to the centre of Winchester through the Central Winchester Regeneration Scheme. Then a couple of delegations, one to the strategic director responsible for SIL to approve the funding allocations in line with the process that's outlined. The second one to delegate authority to the Section 1 officer to approve the capital budget and expenditure up to 500,000. Those are the recommendations. Cabinet, do you agree? Thank you very much indeed. I did threaten that I was going to reread the recommendations. Sadly, that is the process. Right, on to the next item, which I hope will not be hugely controversial and could even be quite quick, but who knows. And this is future arrangements for development management in the South Downs National Park until 2032. Councillor Porter, would you like to introduce the paper?
Yes, thank you. But I will also pass over to our Senior Planning Officer, Julie Pinnock, because I think it's quite technical reasons why we're doing this, but it is important. So, future arrangement for development and management in the South Downs National Park. Winchester City Council area has 2 authorities governing planning in our district. They're different local plans, but they're managed in the same council. And Winchester is one district, but has those 2 different authorities that determine the planning applications. And we're quite unique in our mid group, potentially, our local government group that is doing that. So being a separate planning authority, the South Downs National Park covers the full length of the national park, but in the district of Winchester that process is devolved to Winchester City Council, and currently the South Downs National Park is very happy to continue the service. Their content, their letter to us was very glowing. The paper is a contractual one, so I'm going to pass over to our Head of Service, Julie, in a moment. But on behalf of all councillors who have part of their wards in the National Park, I'd like to thank the team for negotiating this. It's a conversation we've often had. Councillor Bolton and Councillor Lee will also have had this conversation with me. They like to be involved in local planning applications, but actually sometimes it feels there's a democratic deficit if they all went to Midhurst. So it's good to have them managed locally. So having planning decisions and enforcement locally, supported by our specialist officers here in Winchester, improves that democratic link and the link between authorities. So if agreed today, this agreement will be ratified by the South Downs National Park on the 20th of March 26, and then we'll go forward. This already, we've had an extension of the previous arrangement, and this one is for 5.5 years, which takes us into the new arrangements. I have no concerns about that. I think it's a well arranged plan. It's definitely on a call off basis, so we're not committing ourselves to expenses which we don't necessarily have. And in this summary, the continuation of this agreement will address the perceived democratic deficit. It enables better deployment of our specialist team members, and it gives us closer working relationships with the National Park. So if I can pass over to Julie, if you've got any questions, that would be appropriate, but it may be appropriate to have comments from the public first.
We will have comments from our councillor colleagues first. So Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I firmly support the principle of a strong partnership working with South Downs National Park for some of the reasons that Councillor Ford has really highlighted. Delivering planning service more locally has real benefits for residents, parish councils and applicants. And Winchester City Council has developed a strong working relationship, which I've clearly acknowledged, with the National Park over many years. However, can I ask some questions before committing to this agreement running to March 2032? And request clarification on on several points, particularly the financial case, risk exposure and alignment with LGR. So my first point, and did this at the Gallup, so I hope my numbers are correct. The report indicates that the forecast cost of delivering the service over the contract period is 2.65 million, while the anticipated income is 2.25 million. This suggests a 400k shortfall over the agreement. I don't know if that's my interpretation. I'm sure you'll put me right, but the report states that this still meets direct delivery costs, but it also notes that the council normally seeks full cost recovery for services. So can I see clarification or put me right? So yes, the elements of costs are not being recovered, and I wonder if that's appropriate, is my interpretation. And can a full cost recovery model be negotiated with South Downs if I'm right? On the rate increase, the South Downs National Park is proposing an 8% uplift, but operating costs, particularly staffing, are expected to rise 2.5 to 3% annually. So over the 5.5-year contract, that means costs would rise significantly faster than income. Has a sensitivity analysis been done to test whether the service could move further into deficit over the life of the contract? In terms of volume risk, income depends on the application numbers, as I interpret the paper, the numbers and appeals which fluctuate from year to year. So what protections will exist if application volumes fall significantly during the contract period? The report argues that the agreement provides certainty through transition to a unitary authority. However, I wonder committing to a contract till 2030 could potentially bind the future unitary authority unhelpfully. The wider benefits of the partnership, as I've indicated, are recognised. However, I wonder whether the financial case appears marginal based on my quick look analysis. So I'm broadly supportive of continuing the partnership, but I would welcome reassurance on the financial model. Is it sustainable? The risks to the council is understood, and the arrangements are as flexible as they should be given what's coming with LGR. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet again. I support the principle of the continuation of the agreement to deliver development management services for the South Downs National Park. But I too question why we're entering into a deal in 2.4 where we anticipate the cost will exceed the anticipated income for the period. With a gap of £400,000, why would we do such a deal? I hope you can assist. I believe it is fair to say that the council feels the relationship with the South Downs National Park is far from favourable day to day. However, in this paper, it would indicate that the relationship is strong. I appreciate this is a regulatory service which we will provide, but how, Chair, can we leverage this situation to improve our overall understanding with the park and significantly improve the relationship between the two authorities? In particular, I hope we can influence them in some ways. I question whether the strategy for the South Downs National Park is in keeping with our own desire to provide affordable homes. I again appreciate the differential, but how can we influence the strategy policymakers at South Downs National Park? And is it possible to improve this critical situation, which is weak in the park currently? There was mention also of parish councils in 110, and I know the experience of our own councillors is that the relationship is not as strong as they would like it to be with the park. Again, how can we leverage any of this relationship that we're entering into to better reflect how we do business in the rest of our district, which I know is much more inclusive? I hope that we can address particularly the financial question this morning, Chair, because it does feel that the South Downs National Park are getting rather good value for money if we're underwriting it by £400,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Porter.
I'm going to leave that question because it's not quite as it seems on paper. So I'm going to leave that question to Julie Pinnock. I just wanted to raise the matter of the improving relationship there before we pass over to Julie, to Ms Pinnock. That improving relationship wouldn't help if we didn't have the planning relationship at all. It would make it worse. It would make us even more distant. So I'm very conscious of that conversation that we're having, and that is a constant one about trying to improve the relationship with the South Downs National Park, and our strategic services also talk to them a lot, and we're putting pressure in many ways on them. But I do think that actually having the opportunity to manage planning applications within and licensing actually within the scheme of work that we have gives us at least an in. I agree. I think I agree. It does need improving. We need to continue to do that. It's difficult. It's been very difficult to do that, but we are making every effort that we can. But I'm going to pass over to Mrs. Pinnock now just to explain the cost arrangements, because I think it is relevant and it's something that we ourselves queried.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Porter. I think just picking up on the relationship point first, certainly, there are two sides to this. So I'm dealing with the contractual arrangements on an agency agreement, but I do talk to officers at the park about that relationship and how we can make sure that commitment to keep ward councillors and parish councillors up to date. And that's certainly something I know the officers are taking away and continue to consider. And one of my own team moved to a role in the national park, and I've kept that dialogue and that reminder. So whilst I know that's not necessarily getting to the heart of that point today, I'd like to reassure members here that we do continue that dialogue and that reminder. So hopefully that will see that change going forward. I think in terms of the cost arrangements, we were asked to go away and negotiate with the National Park in terms of a best value arrangement. We did that in terms of looking at the current payment arrangements. We've operated the agency agreement since 2011, so we know what the volumes of work are, and they remain consistent in a way which is reassuring. So we know roughly how much we getting a quarter, that's planning applications, appeals and enforcement matters. So we can look at that service that we provide and we can look at how we resource that across our wider team. 2.4 does go on to explain that, you know, whilst that does sit below the council's usual cost recovery position, it wouldn't meet the direct costs. So it balances out, in my view, Councillor Porter, but I'm happy to have our strategic director pick up on that point more widely if that would help.
Yeah, happy to come in there. So just to reassure members that moving forward under the new contractual arrangement, what we're proposing is an 8% increase on the work that we are currently doing. So there is an increase there, and I should say that that was negotiations that happened with the park to arrive at that number, and also the length of term. Members have, you know, that there is a difference between the two numbers in terms of inspected income versus cost, but I should point out that the costs are attached to our standard model, and therefore it's not a complete saving or cost. Those costs would still remain, and they're a proportion of the on costs that are split proportionally across the organisation to this contract. But the bottom line is there is an 8% increase in the work that we are currently doing with the National Park.
Councillor.
Thank you. I'm just going to say that this is about the space a person takes up, partly, and the numbers of people that you have to have, and therefore the money is split across a whole department, even though actually we would have to have those people there anyway. So the space, I'm not describing that very well.
I think it might be a question for the 151 officer,
Yeah.
actually. Are we
Yeah.
talking about marginal out-of-pocket cost or fully loaded cost? So obviously, when you look at fully loaded cost, we make an allocation for directors and senior management and office space and other things, which actually may not vary according to whether we take this contract on or not. So maybe if you could clarify the financial position, that would be helpful.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So the total cost that we've quoted in the report is the total cost of the council, including those overheads. So obviously, if we were no longer delivering this service for the South Downs National Park, we could make a saving potentially on salaries, because we'd need fewer people, because there would be fewer applications processed through the team. But it's more difficult to make savings on overheads. Some of those are fixed costs and some of them are stepped costs. So it wouldn't be possible for us to make savings against all of those. I think it's also important to just cover the fact that it builds resilience in our team. If we have a larger team dealing with a larger volume of applications that flow through, so there is also a benefit to the council on having a more resilient team with more members of staff in it.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a very helpful clarification. Any questions from other members of Cabinet? Any debate? Oh, was that a question or a debate? Do what it just. Off you go.
I was just as the portfolio holder for finance, I accept the explanation around costs here. I think to a certain extent it might have been better if there had been a mechanism for calculating that sort of marginal cost rather than the absolute cost, and that would have been a better comparison. But if the Section 151 officer is happy with that as an explanation, I'm quite happy to take that view.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Any other debates? Any final thoughts, Councillor Porter?
I think it also uses our own specialist officers really well. And that is, it gives a breadth of range of subjects that they're exposed to and involved with. I think that's also important and helps to add to the richness of their experience and their learning and their expertise.
Thank you. Speaking for myself, I'm reassured on the financial position that in practice we're not going to end up hugely out of pocket. And convinced by the advantages we have of having our own planning team working on these applications, or people within the Winchester City Council organisation who can have that extra level of local knowledge about what's right for us and our place. So I think the case is well made here. I think it's the right thing for us to go ahead. We have one recommendation in front of us, which is to authorise the Corporate Head of Planning and Regulatory Services and the Director of Legal to enter into a new agreement for delivery of development management services, including planning enforcement, on behalf of the South Wales National Park Authority until 31st of March 2032, subject to their own agreement on the 20th of March 2026. Cabinet, do you agree? Thank you very much indeed. On to the next paper, risk management. Councillor Cutler, your turn.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to present this annual review of the Council's risk management policy and risk appetite for 26-27. This policy defines the Council's arrangements for identifying and managing risks and its integration with corporate governance and performance management. Our risk management policy sets out how we identify, assess, manage and monitor those risks in a consistent and transparent way across the whole organisation. It ensures that we make informed decisions, allocate resources wisely and maintain accountability to residents, partners and stakeholders. The risk management policy, Appendix 1, sets out our approach and framework for risk management, our assessment tool, how risk management is embedded into corporate planning and operational management, and how we evaluate and respond to risk. Our risk appetite statement works alongside the policy to define the level and types of risk the Council is willing to accept in pursuit of its strategic priorities. It recognises that not all risk is negative. Innovation, transformation, improvement all require a degree of calculated risk-taking. By clearly articulating our appetite, we provide officers and decision makers with guidance on when to be cautious and when to be bold. Following the annual review of the Council's risk appetite, there's been one change for the appetite, and that is to move the appetite for risk from moderate to open in relation to the Thriving Places Council Plan priority. This move supports delivery of, over the next few months, of the important capital areas that we need to resolve before the statutory change order. However, it should be noted that the Council's overall risk appetite has not changed and remains at moderate. At the back of the policy is the Council's corporate risk register, which is regularly reviewed by the Executive Leadership Board, with any changes to the corporate risks reported to Audit and Governance in the quarterly governance monitoring report. This paper was reviewed by the Audit and Governance Committee at the meeting on 5th of March. And the main comment from the meeting was that further consideration be given to whether risk CR10 be amended to include reference to risks relating to biodiversity, or whether biodiversity should be covered in a separate new risk. Officers agreed that further consideration will be taken of this undertaken at ELB. Finally, a minor typo error was spotted in relation to the resident survey under the current controls heading for CR3, and will be corrected before the policy is published on the Council's website. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, before we do that, we have two councillors who wish to speak on this. Councillor Lee first, and then Councillor Godfrey. Do you want to swap it up? It's entirely up to you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Cabinet. As Councillor Cunt has mentioned, we discussed this at the Audit and the Audit Committee. I agree that the report sets out a structured framework for identifying and managing risk, including the corporate risk register. That approach aligns with recognised good practice, which is great. However, I'd like to seek clarity on a number of points which might strengthen confidence in how this framework will operate. First, the report notes that the risks associated with local government organisation are not yet fully understood. They're currently captured as contributing factors. I guess there's nothing more to say until we have an announcement, but of course one would see that as a contributory factor going forward, but as a key strategic risk, which will need to have its own essence of understanding. Moving on to and picking up on Councillor Cutler's comments about thriving places and changing in risk appetite. Again, we discussed this in the audit committee, and an interesting conversation, because the difference between moderate and open is nuanced and is a question of interpretation. But the way I see this is that given the life of this council, that allows us to actually inject more ambition, but not experimental, but adopting new practices where it's tried and tested elsewhere. So, for example, in housing, might be use of modern methods of construction for new retrofit housing procedures and processes. On the climate, it seems to appear that on the corporate risk ratio, it is framed largely in terms of responding to events caused by climate change. Again, I guess it's the way you read this. Given that this council has declared a climate emergency and committed to net zero ambitions, does risk management need to go further? And the question is, could we go faster? And I'll highlight this because obviously we're moving into a new municipal year come May, and I also look forward to Mr. Howson or whoever inviting members to contribute to any thoughts on new risks and KPIs. And again, picking up on the amendment from the audit committee, I was very pleased to identify the absence and emphasis about nature emergency and biodiversity. So I welcome very much the agreement to further review CR 010 and the risks reference to the nature emergency, which I think is really good news. So in sum, I think the risk appetite approach, the risk register and the system looks good. And I look forward to contributing to risks and the process in the next municipal year. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that Councillor Cutler has carried forward the work started 12 years ago to encourage better use of risk management for controlling change across the council. I looked at this paper as a member of the Audit and Governance Committee meeting last week, and we did have a useful discussion. There have only been a very few adjustments to risk policy since last year that were explained and justified at the Audit and Governance meeting. I think that the stability of the policy is a good sign, and this is a policy that should be widely supported. However, it is in its implementation that I have concerns, and whether minor changes can assist. I'm sure that Councillor Cutler will agree with me that the risk management policy should be applied with more confidence, so that decisions can be made that apply the relevant risk appetite more appropriately. For instance, as there is now an open risk appetite when making decisions about good homes for all and greener faster, you would expect your officers to feel able to take more innovative approaches to delivering new council homes that are affordable and come with an acceptable environmental cost. But this is not happening. New builds are running at a cost far in excess of anything that can be expected in rental return. And apart from a very few homes, such as those built in Micheldever, still heavily over budget, are nowhere near the energy and resource efficient standards we aspire to. The open appetite for risk should be used to accept the modern methods of construction or similar innovative methods of delivering greener homes that we have the budget for. This could see modular building material, off-site pre-construction and similar approaches. But these options are still being resisted as too radical for Winchester, even though there are existing framework contracts in place that could be used to procure modern methods of construction suppliers and construction partners. The risk management policy is a good basis for better decisions. So please encourage your officers to use it to achieve the objectives that we all want to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Lee talked about clarity on local government reorganisation. As it has now become a tier 1 project within the council, particularly once the announcement is made, it will have its own risk register. The requirement for a specific line in the corporate risk register may or may not be necessary, because the corporate risk register covers a series of broad areas which may adjust the risks. LGR may adjust the risks within that corporate register, but whether there needs to be a separate line there, I'm sure ELB will work their way through that as the process goes ahead. You talked both about the different levels of risk appetite, and this is always quite a difficult question. Both the housing and Greener Faster we have always had down as open within the council, within the definitions within the risk appetite policy. Although we felt that the overall risk appetite is moderate. I'm glad Councillor Godfrey, I'm glad we both support the principle, and I'm glad Councillor Godfrey continues to support this, something that he started as finance portfolio holder with the encouragement of, well, I mean,
I think you'll find it was me, Councillor Cutler.
Well, I think there was significant development of risk management policy in the at the time when I was chair of audit and governance, and between us, I think Councillor Godfrey and I worked very closely on that. So I'm pleased that he's still supportive of the broad framework. The risk appetite, I mean, I take the point about how one uses that appetite, and I think there is a question of interpretation there. I think perhaps the portfolio holder for housing may wish to comment on some aspects of that, of your points about on the housing side of things. But we have even an open approach does not necessarily say that we'll be the first to do things. Although I think the open approach did apply to the way we approach retrofit to the Swedish cottages, and we were open to look at it, and we have discovered that it's very difficult to do. So that I think that was a good example within that process. But thank you for your comments and the broad support for the risk management policy.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions? Mr. Hendy, modern methods of construction. And I know it is something I was in a recent briefing wearing a hat with the property services team up at Hampshire, who are looking at this in terms of how they build their schools, and it's having quite an impact on cutting carbon. I think we did it with all flats to a large degree, but I would be interested to know to what degree we've looked at those options, and actually if we've had any projects recently where it would be relevant.
Yes, thank you, Leader. If modern methods of construction are more economic than traditional forms, clearly we will use them because there's no reason not to. The issues around MMC, it does improve the time spent on site, so there's reductions of cost there. However, to make it particularly economic, you need to drive very high volumes, and we have a programme, as you know, of 1,000 homes over 10 years. Some of those schemes are particularly bespoke and small schemes, and therefore it will be difficult to be able to use modern methods of construction off-site manufacture to deliver those schemes. But if there are opportunities, clearly we will use them.
Good. I'm reassured to hear that, because it does seem to be something I know that at the county, for example, one of the byproducts has been dramatic, moving from traditional construction to wood frame construction, particularly from steel to wood. And again, it's not so directly relevant to us, but moving from steel frame to wood frame modern methods for school construction cuts carbon dramatically. I think the 4 schools they built recently saved enough carbon in their construction to cover the county council's entire electricity bill for a year, to give you an idea in terms of its carbon impact. Anyway, so I would support that being looked at. We have any final thoughts?
Well, I suppose my response to that, to a certain extent, is and perhaps this reflects my own attitude to risk, is that one of the big problems we found with our council housing retrofit programme is unconventionally built housing, and so there is a risk using unconventional methods some way down the line, perhaps in some cases. So we do need to we would need to look at those risks as well.
To talk about it in terms of the innovation cycle, it's to be early majority rather than early adopter, probably is the space that we would want to be in. Okay, now that's a fair point. Presumably once the Swedish cottages were a modern method of construction, which have not aged well in terms of the technological impact. So we have in front of us a paper that's been carefully looked at by our Audit and Governance Committee, and you can ask for nothing more when it comes to a risk management policy. And thank you for reporting. Thank you, colleagues, for reporting back, and for Councillor Cutler for reporting back on what we heard there. Generally, I've heard support from all sides. So if we could approve the risk management policy for 26-27, the risk appetite statement for 26-27, reflecting the change in particular that relates to our risk appetite for thriving places, and agree the risk register, the current risk register. Cabinet, do you agree that?
Agree.
Thank you very much indeed. On to Q3 finance and performance monitoring. Councillor Cutler.
Sorry, thank you, Leader. This is the third quarterly performance report for the 25-26 financial year, and focuses on progress and achievements, delivering the priorities of the council plan between the period 1st of October and 31st of December. There's been one update since we changed since the previous quarterly report, and that is to include a programme highlight for local government reorganisation, and that's been included in the efficient and effective council plan section of the report. Progress on TC25 is now reported in the finance section of the report. No other changes have been made to the format of the performance report, and as before, it is arranged into sections and aligned to each of the 6 council plan priorities. The final section covering the council's financial position for both general fund and HRA as at the 31st of December. Highlights from the report include within that quarter that 4 food waste collection rounds had been introduced, and with further rollout as Councillor Crimoyson raised earlier. Winchester Sport and Leisure Park announced as the winner of the Regional Public Club or Centre of the Year for the Southern Region at the 2025 UK Active Awards. That contracts are exchanged for the acquisition of 146 Section 106 units at Kings Barton, driving forward our priority to deliver 1,000 new homes, and consultation being undertaken with key stakeholders as part of stage 1 of the community governance review. The report was presented to the Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of March. There were a number of questions which were responded to by officers and by me, which included some clarity sought about the programme to update wastewater treatment plants. It was confirmed that the baseline data through chemical analysis of both nitrate and phosphate discharges on all plants was produced in order to prioritise the plants. The the plants where significant reductions could be achieved by upgrades, which would also generate nitrate and phosphate credits. The upgraded plants are monitored by testing to demonstrate the reduction which generate the credits. I've repeated that again simply because it's a question that's come up so many times, and I think clarity is there. The Scrutiny Committee also requested an update, which we were unable to give at the meeting, on the Voltex solar PV, which I will circulate to the committee, but for clarity and transparency also read out here. The Voltex car park solar array was designed with battery storage so that the electricity generated would power the car park first and then recharge the batteries. This approach was intended to reduce the council's electricity costs rather than generate income by exporting power to the grid. The system was forecasted to export very little. However, after a year of operation, this assumption proved to be incorrect. There then followed vandalism to the solar array, which further delayed the council's ability to apply for the export payments. So we've been unable to do that until the array was finally completely repaired in September. Initial application has been submitted. The payments are expected to be in place by the summer, when the vast majority of our surplus will be exported. Now that the array is fully operational, it is saving the council roughly £9,000 a year in grid electricity cost and reducing carbon emissions by around 7 tonnes annually. Once the export payments begin, the array will also generate approximately a further £4,000 per annum. So I will send those details across to the members of scrutiny who asked the question. Happy to answer any further questions on the report.
Thank you very much indeed. We have two councillors who wish to speak. Councillor Lee and Councillor Bolton. Councillor Lee. Now, Councillor Lee gets to go first because he's quicker and more efficient at putting in requests to speak. But obviously, you stop digging.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not going to labour this because I think scrutiny obviously dug deep, which is good. But just to say, I welcome the Q3 report and the work officers have undertaken to track the quantity and quality delivery across the council plan priorities. Regular performance reporting is essential for transparency and accountability, particularly at a time when the council faces significant financial pressures, climate and nature crisis, and the wider uncertainties associated with LGR, which no doubt will become clearer. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things picked up at scrutiny, and the first is the issue about anticipated carbon savings from the decarbonisation of the key corporate buildings and remaining on track. And given the council's commitment to become carbon neutral by 2030, delivery of these projects is obviously critical. Are the projected carbon reductions from corporate buildings decarbonisation still expected to be delivered on schedule? If there are delays or cost pressures, what contingency plans exist to keep the council on the trajectory to carbon neutrality by 2030? And are we actually measuring the carbon reductions from completed projects or relying primarily on forecast modelling? It would be useful to understand that. I think the only other question that I was going to ask, which I'm not sure there was an answer, but hopefully you may be able to clarify, and that was the issue about the waste performance target of 420 kilograms per household. So are the quarterly figures reported cumulative towards the annual target, or are they standalone quarterly measures? So in sum, Scrutiny did a great job. So I'm fully supportive of the quarterly report, and as I said earlier, I look forward to contributing to the new municipal year's KPIs and formation of risk thinking. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. At scrutiny recently, I questioned Councillor Cutler about what I see as the serious under-delivery of TC25, and I was told that I had misunderstood what the programme was about. It was meant to be an organisation-wide transformation programme to deliver 3 million a year in savings within 3 years, Transformation Challenge 2025. That was the promise, a bold transformation programme delivering 3 million annual savings through fundamental changes to how the council operates. In fact, only delivering 55% of what it professed to target. We now learn that the administration has dropped TC25 monitoring from the performance monitoring report and merged it into local government reorganisation monitoring, and will now be treated as business as usual. How can a programme that has not delivered its promised savings now be considered ready to become business as usual? When we look at the figures, another issue becomes clear. Presentation of savings blurs the critical distinction between revenue increases and cost reductions. Revenue growth is welcome, but it is uncertain and often outside the council's direct control. Cost savings, on the other hand, are the only measures that provide immediate, reliable and repeatable reductions in our baseline spending. A transformation programme aimed at financial sustainability should primarily deliver cost savings, but TC25 has not delivered them at anything like the scale promised. Instead, we see a reliance on income measures and limited evidence of the transformational redesign of services that was supposed to underpin the programme. So rather than delivering the 3 million transformation challenge that was promised, you appear to be quietly reclassifying the programme as routine activity. I seem to remember when you were failing to hit your target for net zero for the council's assets, you took the same approach, reclassifying the council's housing stock as out of scope. That does not make the problem go away, and residents do not appreciate the administration taking them for fools. If TC25 has not delivered the level of sustainable cost savings it was created to achieve, then it should not simply be absorbed into business as usual. It should be recognised honestly for what it is, a programme that has fallen short of its original objectives. Thank you very much.
Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Leader. In terms of Councillor Lee's question on anticipated carbon savings, I see no evidence that there is a problem within our programme on decarbonisation, but I would defer to Councillor Lerney if she wishes to add to that. I'll go through the others first and then perhaps give you an opportunity to come back. I mean, the one other main point that I think Councillor Lee made around this was this discussion on residual waste, and I'm in discussion with Mrs. Keys and Mr. Howson about how we probably rejig this, and I'll talk to Councillor Cremoyson as well. The figures as shown in the report are the quarterly residual waste figures, and the target is the annual target. So you need to add them all up to see whether we've hit the target, which isn't perhaps as clear as it might be. So we have several options as to how we deal with that. We could do a rolling annual figure each quarter, which is the measure that I would prefer. Or we could do a cumulative from the beginning of the year, which means in the quarter of 3, you'd hope you're 3/4 of the way there, but you'd still have to work that out. Or alternatively, we make the target quarterly rather than annual. So I'll look at that and present the options to the scrutiny committee and see which they prefer for the next report. In terms of TC25, it's getting to be a bit of a crack record from Councillor Bolton on TC25. We would be, without LGR, we would certainly be cracking on with the programme and the more extensive investment in digitisation that we had planned that would have delivered the full savings across the piece. You will have seen in the budget paper we agreed certain aspects of continued digitisation, which will be a continual part of the TC25 process. But the pressures of LGR mean that leaving it as a tier 1 priority project seems to be we simply do not have capacity in that respect. So we will be continuing to make progress on areas that we identified within the TC25 process, but getting LGR right is somewhat more important at this stage. Mrs. Keys may want to comment further. She's looking at me quizzically. So.
Would you like to? So.
I agree with what Councillor Cutler's just said. Yes, we had a bold and ambitious programme. LGR forced us to reassess that. We always knew that the quick win savings that were achievable would need also to have the long-term savings from major transformation through digitalisation, and it's that has been impacted by LGR. I would say, and I did use the phrase that we'd embedded a lot of the TC25 principles into our business as usual when this was discussed at scrutiny committee, and we have done that. We've worked hard with the officer team to make sure they take a commercial mindset when they're decision making and managing contracts and seeking digital solutions. So as a team, we have saved over £1.5 million from our baseline budget. One-off savings of deciding to not spend something on something in a particular year are easier. To achieve £1.5 million of savings out of our baseline budget on top of those one-off decisions, I would defend the team and say that has been a success. But yes, there's no doubt that LGR has had an impact on the ambitious nature that we took for TC25.
Thank you. Any other questions from colleagues on that point or any other point? Councillor Learning.
Thank you. Just a comment on a response to a question rather than a question. In terms of the reducing carbon from council-owned occupied estate, that continues to be ongoing. However, LGR has clearly led to a change in priorities in terms of what it's been sensible for us to look at. And also when we've looked at projects which are achievable in the timescale we have and when we can agree to things happening, we again have obviously had to look at where we're focusing our effort. So an example from earlier today is that we've been working hard on those schemes to put photovoltaics on the cathedral and on the science centre, which potentially are really big carbon reduction measures, not necessarily on our estate, but they will be council-owned projects at the end of the day. It's clear that some of our buildings, such as the city offices, may well be surplus to requirements in a couple of years' time. So there is a question about whether it's worth investing in those at this point in time. However, clearly the Guildhall will be here, and that is where we're choosing to make investments, and we'll be looking at the opportunities there are to achieve carbon reduction in this building. Well, and particularly reduced energy bills as well, as part of the work we're planning to build to get this building back into a good state.
And I think it's important to note and thank the energy management colleague who has joined asset management and who is delivering against both of those, improving our carbon footprint and also helping us cut our electricity bills. And his work is greatly appreciated and an important contributor to TC25. Any other questions? Councillor Crimoyson.
Yes, if I could just add a comment to build on Councillor Cutler's comments about the various waste and recycling streams. I think one of the things that maybe isn't always apparent is that there are ebbs and flows in terms of the volume of the different streams. Even when you've got a stable situation. But what we do know is we've already introduced food waste collection, and that is having an impact on those streams in a positive way. And with all the other changes that are coming through, we'd expect further changes to it. So I think we just need to be a little bit careful there in locking down targets, which will get, in the end, there'll be changes that will actually make them somewhat redundant. So it's more about, I think, getting the direction right rather than the absolutes. But in time, when things are stable, targets are absolutely important to make sure that, things are actually being done at the target level. Just add that comment in, and we'll have a conversation offline.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments or things that people would like to say? I think one point I'd touch on as far as TC25 is concerned and its interrelation with local government reorganisation is there is still going to be transformation. There's going to be massive transformation as a result of LGR, but it's different, and it will not be us on our own that is doing it. So, earlier we talked about how planning is going to work in the South Downs National Park. Now, East Hampshire doesn't do the planning for the South Downs National Park. So if we look at local government reorganisation, and every single scenario that there is has Winchester go with East Hampshire, one obvious piece of transformation which would deliver cost efficiency would be to have a single planning authority within the footprint for our national parks. And indeed, if we end up in the option where we're with New Forest, we might even have a specialist national parks planning team. Who knows? But that's something we couldn't do on our own, and it wouldn't be sensible to do on our own when we don't know what the boundaries of the new reorganisation would be. There will be savings in other areas which will come from looking across the entire district. There will be a transformation programme, for example, all our HR systems, our payroll systems, our tax collection systems, our benefit systems. There will be huge major transformation projects because the new unitary will need one system. We will need to a point where it has one payroll. That may not happen on the first day. These things take time, but there is massive transformation in the pipeline. So the idea that TC25 can continue and pretend that this other transformation work isn't going to go on that directly affects us is a myth. And that's why we've rebalanced the plan as outlined. We shouldn't, and I would stress, all of that transformation will also be going alongside the other huge amount of work, which in the end is going to be done by the same people to make sure we deliver safe and legal services on the first day of the new authority. Because even more important than having one payroll system is to make sure that no child that needs support is left uncared for. No older person that is getting visits from social services has a visit missed. And actually that will be our first priority. There will be services that absolutely have to keep running non-stop, seamlessly for our residents when local government reorganisation comes along. And I make absolutely no apology at all for recognising that some of the resource that was previously working on TC25 will be working on making sure that our most vulnerable residents are safe and cared for and supported. And these are the kind of choices that are presented to us by local government reorganisation and which we need to consider as we think about the future that lies ahead of us. But ultimately, the paper in front of us is about what we've been doing and isn't about local government reorganisation. There is a reference to it because it is a major project and it keeps Councillor Cutler and I and officers very busy. But this is a chance to celebrate all the other things we've done. The local plan that we will be discussing at scrutiny and cabinet, if agreed, will have hugely ambitious policies on carbon still, and we should be very proud of that achievement. We've talked about the delivery of food waste, our national leadership in tackling phosphates and nitrates. You know, we're doing things that no one else has done in the way that we've done it. The recognition of the successful operation of the leisure centre, big things like that, small things like the new boxing club lease, the Roe Park Pavilion being on track, new council homes being delivered. Let's not forget that. That's a huge priority for us. The local plan being delivered, homes being retrofitted, all while playing a leading role on local government reorganisation and continuing to drive efficiency and setting a balanced budget now and in the future. So I would like to pay tribute to all the council officers in all the functions of the council that work so hard to deliver these results. Cabinet colleagues also, I know you put in the hours as well, and that's appreciated, but if the chief executive and the directors could take back to their teams, and their senior officers, statutory officers could take back to their teams how much we appreciate what they do for this council and for the residents of our district, that would be hugely appreciated. So in terms of what we are being asked to do, I think we are asked to note this one, normally, noting the progress achieved during Q3 and endorsing the contents of the report. Cabinet, are you happy to endorse and note accordingly? Great, thank you very much indeed. Good. So the next item is to note the future items for consideration by Cabinet as on the April 2026 forward plan. Are you happy to note that? Thank you. And we will not be covering the exempt business. So I think we've reached the end of the agenda, done everything that was on it. Thank you all very much indeed for a marathon session. Thank you for opposition colleagues for coming in and raising the points you did. And I declare the meeting adjourned. Closed.